Chapter 6:12. Jianghu, has the matter been resolved? After the war shield returned to the manor, Jianghu and Conrad also got out of the car. After watching Conrad happily return, Jianghu also returned to the villa. As soon as he returned, Bernice anxiously asked Jianghu. Yeah, it's all resolved. Looking at Bernice, Lilia, Delina, Marian, Azalina, and Aphrodite who were gathered in the living room of his villa, Jianghu's face showed a smile for the first time today. Then he lay down on the sofa with a slightly tired expression. Looking at Jianghu's movements and listening to Jianghu's words, the women breathed a sigh of relief. Then they immediately surrounded him and asked about what happened tonight. Jianghu also gave them a simple explanation. When they heard that Jianghu went up and scolded them, these women couldn't help but laugh. This was Jianghu. If it was another person, they wouldn't be so energetic. Indeed, this matter was because of Jianghu. As the old saying goes, if you don't do anything wrong during the day, you won't be afraid of ghosts at night. And as the old saying goes, if you have no desires, you will be strong. Jianghu's secret was his dragon balls. It wasn't really because of the good environment here that he could raise such a good cow. Jianghu's biggest reliance was himself. Therefore, he could create all kinds of soaring dragon manors anytime and anywhere. As long as he wanted, he could build as many as he wanted. Moreover, he didn't evade taxes, nor did he break the law. Even if someone wanted to mess with him, did they think that the 2 billion oil futures that he prepared was a joke? As long as he took out the 2 billion, the people in the world who wanted to protect him could line up from his home to the imperial capital. No one would care about a manor lord with a net worth of more than 100 million, but no one wouldn't care about a manor lord with a net worth of more than 100 million. This was the problem of natural wealth. Jianghu had the strength to do this. Since Jianghu was not afraid of official matters, what was there to be afraid of? As for what was said later, it was even more so. Between Jianghu and Winthrop, Jianghu didn't need to rely on Winthrop for anything. The cooperation between the two was led by Jianghu. He was doing this to make money. If Winthrop made him unhappy, then he would create another Winthrop. He was someone who wanted to make money and be happy at the same time. Well, since the matter is settled, let's go take a bath and sleep. Hearing Jianghu's simple explanation, Bernice also smiled. She felt that she really didn't have anything to do recently. Her heart seemed to be tied to Jianghu. Jianghu always said that he was a salted fish, but Bernice felt that she was about to become a salted fish. In the past, she had focused on studying medicine in order to cure her sister. But now, her sister had been cured by Jianghu. There was no point for her to study medicine anymore. After all, she didn't lack money. Staying with Jianghu all day seemed to make her lazier. But she enjoyed this kind of life. In fact, to be honest, not everyone was a workaholic. At least, Jianghu wasn't. Let's go. Hearing Bernice say that she wanted to take a bath, Jianghu didn't say much. He waved his hand and everyone went to the hot spring together. But was what Bernice said true? Jianghu didn't think so. Would those guys give up so easily? Walking out of the villa, Jianghu glanced at Dai, who was not sitting on Goldie's head, and Chirp, who had just returned and was lying in his nest. Sometimes animals were more useful than people, such as when monitoring. After taking a shower, nothing happened. However, when Jianghu returned to his room, Janice and Bridget had already sneaked in. Needless to say, what happened next was inevitable. Jianghu didn't need to say much about it. While Jianghu was immersed in the land of warmth, the situation on Selene's side was not so good. Early the next morning, those who were arrested by the police, like Augustine and the others, all walked out of the police station. Just like what Jianghu said, although they incited the crowd, it was not to rebel, and it was not to spread the news, so the police couldn't sue them. After being locked up for a night, these people walked out of the police station dispiritedly. Augustine, what do we do now? The man who was punched last night and lost his teeth covered his swollen face and said with some annoyance. Originally, people like them had a hard life. Before Jianghu came, it was still okay. They could still rob, collect protection fees, and so on. The police in the town were limited and couldn't manage so many people. But since Jianghu came, he gave a lot of money to the police station. Of course, he was referring to the taxes. Now, the Winthrop police station was expanding again and again. In order to make tourists feel safe here, the small police station, which originally only had a dozen people, already had nearly 100 people before Jianghu's accident. After Jianghu's accident, they expanded again. In a small town police station, there were now more than 200 and 300 police officers. These people searched day and night. They couldn't even steal anything, let alone rob or collect protection fees. There were also more than 30 police cars in the small town. Every day, they went back and forth in the small town, making these people very depressed. They really didn't have a place to live, but they weren't willing to find a job like this. They were used to being lazy and didn't dare to be arrogant. In the past few months, the people of Winthrop lived very happily, but these people didn't have a good life. So when Augustine found them, they immediately agreed to Augustine's plan to teach Jianghu a lesson. The money that Celanese gave was one thing. They were probably the people of Winthrop who wanted to go back to how they were before. But now that they had offended Jianghu, they couldn't even live their original lives in the small town. At this time, at the entrance of the police station, people looked at them with eyes full of disgust. This was driving them crazy. Now, they didn't doubt that if they went to buy something, no one would sell it to them. And the people who caused all this were Augustine and Celanese people. Naturally, they had to ask clearly. Don't worry, you guys go home first. I'll give you the news. I'll go ask Mr. Ruffian now. However, at this time, Augustine was also a clay bodhisattva crossing the river. He couldn't even protect himself. Asking him to help these people, he wanted to ask who would help him. He was the main leader of this incident. These hoodlums couldn't survive here, let alone him. But now, this was all they could do. They dispersed and returned to their own homes. Some people wanted to buy some food when they went back, but not to mention those restaurants, even the supermarket didn't welcome them. These people could only leave with their tails between their legs. This also made them even more determined to hate Jianghu. This time, they really had no way out. Because if they wanted to live here, they could only let Jianghu leave here. Ignoring these people's experiences, Augustine went to Jianghu's seaside villa at this time to look for Peter. Luckily, Peter happened to be there. After he explained the purpose of his visit, Peter smiled. Augustine, don't worry. Augustine, you don't have to worry. You are an official employee of our company. I won't give up on you no matter what. At worst, you can go back to Texas with us and continue to work. As for those people, you have to stabilize them first. I'm looking for people from the Boston authorities to put pressure on the town and let Mayor Wallace let the town hold a referendum. At that time, your friends will all be important votes. Looking at Augustine, Peter said with a smile. But Jianghu made it clear that he doesn't support us, and he said such things last night. Frankly speaking, if we hold a referendum now, we may not even get 100 votes. Augustine frowned. To be honest, Augustine did not have any expectations for this referendum. It was really because the difference between the two camps was really too big. Then what if you say that Jianghu agrees? Hearing Augustine's words, Peter smiled mysteriously. You mean, you have a way to get Jianghu to agree? Hearing what Peter said, Augustine Wilson could not help but feel a little excited. If Jianghu really agreed, then such a referendum would not be difficult at all. Even if he did not want to admit it, he had to admit that Jianghu's influence in Winthrop was too strong. Although he had only been here for a year and had only really done things in the same month, he controlled the most important lifeline of Winthrop, money. As a capitalist society, no one would say no to money, including these townspeople. When the time comes, you'll know. Hearing what Augustine said, Peter did not say much. He just smiled mysteriously. However, he did not notice that at this time, on a tree opposite the open window, a squirrel was lying there, watching everything in front of it. There was a very small camera on its chest. Through the signal, the content and sound captured by this miniature camera directly entered a computer in Jianghai's house on the other side of the town. At this time, in front of the computer, Azalina was eating shrimp chips while watching the image in front of her and listening to the content inside. If you want to get Jianghai to change his mind, it's definitely impossible to use money. It's probably also impossible to find someone to pressure Jianghai. After all, Jianghai does not give face to any officials. Since it's not using money or finding someone to intercede, then it can only be one way. Hey, I hope you don't play dirty. You're digging your own grave. Looking at the image in front of her, Azalina laughed softly. If these people were really like what Azalina thought, playing dirty in order to force Jianghai to change his mind, then Jianghai would not mind letting them know that his dirty tricks were more ruthless than theirs. Chapter 613. Phew. Standing in front of the villa's door, Jianghai looked at the slightly gloomy sky and couldn't help but exhale a white breath. Of course, at this time, he wasn't practicing anything. Although the Dragon Ball in his body has some Xianxia style, the problem is that he doesn't have Xianxia skills. He doesn't know how to control the fog or anything. He also doesn't know how to practice any immortal techniques. And the only reason why he exhaled white breath now is that the weather has started to get cold. Tightening his hoodie, Jianghai stretched a little, then stretched his legs and prepared to go out for a run. Since the last time he went to the town to hold a meeting with the townspeople, it has been almost a week. In this week's time, Winthrop has changed a lot. Originally, there were still some townspeople who were hesitant. They said that they were threatened by Jianghai's warning. They finally settled down and began to live their previous lives. No one would mention the matter of allowing the chemical factory to enter the city again. They are very satisfied with their current life. They don't want their current good life to be destroyed by the entry of the chemical factory. Especially since Jianghai made it clear that these guys are absolutely not allowed to enter the factory. But although this matter was settled, there was still some awkwardness between the people in Jianghai's manor and the townspeople. The townspeople didn't know whether Jianghai was still angry or not, and Jianghai was too lazy to care about them. After solving this matter, Jianghai lived an unusual life of a homebody again. He didn't leave the manor these days. However, staying at home every day was still very cool. After doing some simple activities, Jianghai also ran along the river in the manor. But before he could run a few steps, he saw a tractor in the distance. It was a tractor that was pulling weeds slowly came over. Hey, boss, I haven't seen you run for a while. Seeing Jianghai, Robbins Garcia, who was driving the tractor, couldn't help but smile. Hearing his words, Jianghai also smiled a little awkwardly. Recently, Jianghai tried to live a gentle life. Every night, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Shira, Ohilia, Bridget, and Janice, 2 of the 8 girls would go to Jianghai's room to sleep. In the morning, they would quietly leave. Of course, little Huang and Xiao Bai, who woke up early, protected them as they left. If they went back alone, Jianghai wouldn't be at ease. Every day, he has a beautiful woman in his arms, and no one would be willing to get up and run. If it wasn't for the fact that yesterday was the last Dregs day, Aphrodite and the others were all busy until late at night and didn't come to Jianghai's place, he wouldn't have had the sudden urge to come out for a run today. This was something he would only do when he was in the period of abstinence. Are you ready to pull the grass now? Looking at the grass behind Robbins Garcia, Jianghai wisely changed the topic. That's right. Winter is coming soon. We have 27,000 cows to raise this year. The quality of the grass here is so good that I don't plan to buy miscellaneous fodder, such as crushed corn, anymore. There's a lot of shortage in the amount of grass this winter. Looking at the sky, Robbins Garcia couldn't help but whisper. Following his gaze, Jianghai also felt a little emotional. In Boston, there wasn't a lot of rain in the summer, but there was a lot of snow in the winter. Just like last year, if that kind of snow was anywhere else, it would definitely be considered a snowstorm. Of course, it was also a snowstorm here, but the people of Winthrop seemed to be used to it because to them, such snowstorms weren't rare. Every year, there would be very thick snow here. Last year, it was just a little thicker. The snow covering the ground would protect the land and nourish the fertility of the land. Next year, it would grow better grass, better grains, and better vegetables. Therefore, in the United States, or rather in Winthrop, people didn't dislike snow as much as they thought. In Jianghai's Soaring Dragon Manor, Robbins Garcia and the others had long been immune to snow. Last year, they prepared a lot of grass. Of course, more importantly, they bought a lot of fodder. The fodder was made of crushed corn and some grains. The price wasn't low, but these things were also the main food for the cows in winter. However, after tasting the benefits of grass, Robbins Garcia was no longer prepared to buy fodder this year. It was better to feed them directly, although the amount needed was larger. Therefore, they had already started pulling grass half a month ago. If Jianghai hadn't met him today, he might not have known that Robbins Garcia was already preparing fodder for winter. "I'll go help." Compared to running, Jianghai was also interested in building his own manor, so he said to Robbins Garcia with a smile. Robbins Garcia naturally wouldn't refuse Jianghai's kindness. He smiled and motioned for Jianghai to get in the car. Jianghai somersaulted and jumped onto the back of the tractor, which was in the grass. Then he followed Robbins Garcia towards the direction of the cowshed. Because the weather had turned cold, the cattle would come out of the shed later than in the summer. They would come out of the shed around 8 o'clock. It was only 6 o'clock, so there was still some time. When they pulled the grass to a warehouse next to the cowshed, Jianghai found that Belle and Harriman had been waiting here for a long time. Of course, they weren't idle either. Philemon and Burke Dollar were cutting grass on the other side of the field. They needed to make the grass into straw bricks. In other words, they needed to tie up the grass and put it together in a square. Of course, tying up grass like this wasn't a skill in this place. Other people who raise cows and horses would also tie them up. However, they only tied up hay, unlike Jianghai who directly tied up grass. Seeing Jianghai come over to help, Belle and Harriman couldn't help but smile. This made things a lot easier for them. After jumping down from the tractor, Jianghai and the other two brought the grass to the warehouse. As Robbins Garcia pulled the grass again, Jianghai also learned to tie up the grass with the other two. Putting on gloves, Jianghai tied up the grass with them. He had to admit that it wasn't easy to tie up the grass. First, the grass was soft. It wasn't like dry grass, which was upright and easy to shape. Grass was soft and slippery, especially since it was still morning and there was a layer of dew on it, so it wasn't easy to tie it up. Second, the length of the grass was the same. Of course, the length of the dry grass was different too. But the dry grass was hard. After tying it up, they just had to cut it with a guillotine, and the dry grass would become the same length. However, the length of the grass guillotine was uneven. Even veterans like Belle and Harriman couldn't tie it up very quickly, let alone a newbie like Jianghai. Although Jianghai's strength was much greater than theirs, Jianghai's speed was much slower than theirs. They had tied up two, but Jianghai had only tied up one, which looked a little weird. Phew, this is much more tiring than running. Looking at the fruits of his labor, Jianghai stood up, wiped the sweat on his forehead, and said helplessly. Hearing Jianghai's words, Belle and Harriman both laughed. "Boss, it's Halloween next week, do we need to prepare?" After laughing, Belle changed the topic very naturally. He looked at Jianghai and asked him. But after hearing his words, Jianghai was a little stunned. Halloween? To be honest, Jianghai knew about this festival, but he had never celebrated it. Because although Wuxia knew about this festival, to be honest, not many people celebrate this festival. Only some games would arrange some special missions during this time, but Jianghai wasn't interested in these things. The official date of Halloween was November 1st, but on the night of October 31st, children would run around in the small town, wearing some strange clothes, just like in the movies, and shouting things like, "Give me candy or make trouble." Generally, at this time, people who are knocked on the door will take out some candy for these children to eat. Of course, there were also some families who wanted to save trouble and would give these children some pocket money to send them away. Jianghai's place is located outside Winthrop town, so it is estimated that no children will come to play, so Belle asked. When he came here last year, there was no Halloween. At that time, to be honest, everyone didn't know Jianghai very well, and Jianghai didn't mean to integrate into the town, so naturally, no one would come here. But this year, after all, Jianghai still has some relationship with the town. If someone comes here and Jianghai is not prepared, then it won't be good. Well, this is a good idea. He rubbed his chin. Although Jianghai was a homebody and hated trouble, it was still a holiday. It wasn't like he had autism. If there were kids coming over to play, he wouldn't refuse. But he was so far away, so it would be difficult. I'll buy some candy in a while. Clapping his hands, Jianghai said to Belle with a smile. His family really didn't prepare these things, so he needed to go to town to prepare. Hearing Jianghai's words, Belle and Harriman couldn't help but laugh. After entering November, the festivals in the United States became more and more special. This was also one of the favorite months of the year for American children. November was Halloween, and the end of November, which was the fourth Sunday, was Thanksgiving. After this month, December was the most important Christmas and New Year's Day. Before the new year, the manor will also usher in a new wave of savings. With Jianghai's generosity, he will definitely let his subordinates have a good new year. This is something that no one needs to remind Jianghai of. By the way, boss, you also have to buy some jack-o'-lanterns, these are also important. Hearing that Jianghai decided to buy candy, Harriman couldn't help but remind him, for fear that Jianghai would forget. For his reminder, Jianghai also smiled and responded. Although he doesn't know why he wants to buy jack-o'-lanterns, he will still abide by the local customs. A buddy told Xiao Fei that there are a lot of asterisks in the novel, so Xiao Fei took a look and found that a person's name was censored, Peter Yrt. God knows why this name was censored. Is it that even foreign names are not allowed to be written in the future? Vomiting blood. Chapter 6:14. After tying up the fodder for more than an hour, Jianghai also went to the stable and looked at little Xia. But at this time, after a year of raising, little Xia had completely grown up. He was much taller than an ordinary horse. And the most important thing was that little Xia seemed to have mutated because of Jianghai's spiritual energy. His head seemed to be slightly bigger than an ordinary Shire horse. Jianghai was more than 190 centimeters tall. In front of little Xia, he didn't even reach his shoulder. In other words, this horse was at least 2 meters tall. This didn't include the horse's head. After feeding him the carrots, Jianghai deliberately led him out. With his strong jump, Jianghai jumped on the horse's back. He didn't need to wear a saddle or anything like that. He rode little Xia and trotted on the field for a while. Shire horses were different from ordinary horses. Ordinary horses liked to run. Horses were born to run. But Shire horses were different. This kind of horse was too heavy. It was like a big fatty. It could run, but it couldn't run for a long time. This was because its bones couldn't bear it. This was the main problem. Therefore, Jianghai and little Xia trotted for about half an hour before Jianghai took little Xia back to his villa. When he returned to the villa, the 5 girls in the villa had already gotten up. But Azalina was always floating around. Jianghai didn't know where she was. Lilia, Daliana, and Marian were preparing breakfast. Bernice was exercising on the second floor. After Jianghai entered, he greeted them and then went to take a bath. After taking a bath, he told them that he was going to drive to Winthrop. When Jianghai's shield entered Winthrop, the town's residents also saw Jianghai. However, the atmosphere between them and Jianghai was still a bit awkward. They didn't treat Jianghai as an enemy like a few days ago. They even hid far away. But they also didn't take the initiative to greet him like before. Jianghai didn't care about the changes in these townsfolk. He drove to the parking lot. After parking the car, he entered the town's shopping street. After all, it was already the end of October. The weather in Winthrop was cold. It wasn't a good time to travel. Although the beach could still be visited, even during the hottest time of the day, people couldn't go to the sea. Most of the people who came here to play in the sea. Now that they couldn't go to the sea, naturally, there were fewer people who came here. Although the travel agency had already reduced the price in winter, the originally crowded Winthrop was obviously much less crowded at this time. But even so, there were still some tourists, about 100 of them. They looked around the shopping street. Since the opening of the shopping street, it had indeed become an attractive spot for tourists. On this street, the American Museum of History and the Indian Museum were obviously good places to visit. They were also free of charge. The same was true for the cathedral on this block. These places gave people a feeling of a scenic spot. The things sold here, whether in terms of price or quality, were much cheaper than those sold in China. Moreover, they were brought back from the United States. The 13 slots would also increase unknowingly. Therefore, the commercial street, which originally had high hopes, was now becoming more and more important. According to the financial report that Moses Adams submitted to Jianghu last month, the shopping street's net profit was $1.7 million last month alone. Of course, this referred to the profit, not the total profit. After all, the price of labor, shop rent, and goods still had to be taken into account. But even so, they still made more than $1 million. Almost every shop made $20,000 to $30,000. But it was the Native American shop that made the most money. The ginseng, maple syrup, and Native American jewelry, such as wolf fangs, were all sold at a very high price. This month, the shop had made $410,000 in net income. This shop was jointly owned by Jianghu, the town, and the Iroquois tribe. Jianghu took 20% of the profits, the town took 20%, and the Iroquois took 60%. The Iroquois were very happy about this. Usually, it would be good if they could sell their goods for $50,000. But now, they had sold their goods for $250,000. They bought a lot of things back to the mountains. Their relationship with Winthrop was getting closer and closer. Of course, the one who made the most money was still Jianghu. Last month, Jianghu had earned more than $900,000, almost $1 million, just from the shop rent and his share of the profits. In addition to the rental of the villa and the share of the shooting range, Jianghu had earned nearly $2 million from the town's tourism industry. Of course, the town's tourism industry was still far from its peak. According to Moses Adams, if Jianghu's ocean paradise was built, he could earn more than $20 million a year from Winthrop's tourism industry, although $20 million was not a small amount. However, Jianghu didn't really care about this money. After all, he earned a lot more from selling his body than this money. This year, he earned more than $1 billion by selling cattle. Next year, he will also sell fish. Jianghu felt that it was not difficult for his income to exceed $3 billion. This tourism industry was actually more due to Jianghu's actions to stabilize the town. As far as the current situation was concerned, it was still quite good because he was already above the town's residents. Jianghu? While thinking, Jianghu strolled around the commercial street, looking for a shop selling pumpkin lanterns and candy. But not long after, a voice sounded. Hearing this voice, Jianghu looked back and found that Shendi Clive was standing in front of a shop at this time, holding a bag of clothes in her hand. When she saw Jianghu, her eyes were obviously a little complicated. Sandy, what a coincidence. Looking at this girl, the first girl who made him have the impulse to confirm a relationship with her, Jianghu also smiled. Although now it seems that the two of them did not get together by accident, after all, they used to have feelings for each other. As for now, Jianghu was not sure if it was right for him to continue to flirt with other girls. Yeah, it's really a coincidence. Hearing Jianghu's words, Sandy gently combed her hair and looked at Jianghu and said, "Are you here to buy clothes? Is the town busy recently?" Looking at her, Jianghu asked her with a smile. "The town is fine, it's basically on the right track. I have nothing to do today, so I came to take a look and buy some clothes to wear. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Clive smiled and said, "The town is really calm recently. This kind of life hasn't appeared for a long time. After all, there are disputes where there are people. When the town has more tourists, there will naturally be a lot of rumors. The general quality of tourists who go abroad to play in the Wuxia is still very high. But there are spoiled people everywhere, so Winthrop often encounters some very strange tourists. For example, those who drank too much and caused trouble, those who insisted on buying a gun after shooting targets, or those who insisted on taking the bullets with them, or those who insisted on swimming in the sea. Once these people caused trouble, the town's police would take them away. Those who were drunk were easy to deal with. They would be locked up until they sobered up and compensated according to the price. As for those who caused trouble, education was also the priority. Of course, if they make trouble in the gun shop, they will not be allowed to enter in the future. This is inevitable. As the weather turned cold, there were fewer tourists, but last week, there was a boycott of Jianghu, and the town hall was also very busy. This week was finally completely peaceful, and Clive can also have a good day of rest. However, she couldn't stay at home. After sleeping in, she decided to go shopping. She didn't expect to meet Jianghu. She had to admit that there was a lot of fate between the two of them. "What are you doing here today? Are you here to inspect or to buy things?" After explaining her situation, Clive couldn't help but look at Jianghu. She remembered that Jianghu is quite a homebody. If there is no reason, he will not leave his home, especially when the weather is not very good recently. Buy things, inspect, what the hell? Isn't Halloween coming soon, so I'm going to buy some candy and pumpkins. Jianghu shrugged his shoulders. He obviously doesn't like the word inspection. It sounds like he is a leader. Do I have to pull up my pants and hold a large teacup in my hand? Hey, I didn't expect you to be so childish. I happen to have time, I'll tell you what to buy. Hearing Jianghu's intention, Clive couldn't help but smile, and subconsciously said to Jianghu. Hearing her words, Jianghu and she couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. Then, the two looked at each other and smiled. Without saying anything, they walked towards the shop in the distance. After walking for a short distance, Clive chose a shop. Halloween is a Christian holiday. Legend has it that 2,000 years ago, the Catholic Church set November 1st as the Day of Saints. In 500 BC, the Celts living in Ireland, Scotland moved the program forward by one day, which was October 31st. However, they believed that that day was the official end of winter and the beginning of a new year, the day when the harsh winter began. At that time, people believed that the souls of the deceased would return to their places of residence on that day and look for living creatures in the bodies of the living to be reborn. This was also the only hope for people to be reborn after death. In the beginning, people just extinguished the fires, lights, and so on so that the undead couldn't find humans. Later on, humans would dress up as demons and ghosts to scare off the undead. Of course, these are all legends. I'm just explaining the origin of Halloween to you. Walking into the shop, Clive explained to Jianghu. After all, she used to be a primary school teacher, so she had these stories at her fingertips. Hearing her explanation, Jianghu couldn't help but nod. This Western Ghost Festival is really magical. Chapter 6:15. After all, your manor is too far away from the town. I don't think the children will go there. But if you want to experience the festive atmosphere, you should prepare more. I know you don't lack money anyway. After explaining the origin of Halloween to Jianghu, Clive smiled and picked up the things. There were a lot of things to prepare for Halloween. In addition to candies, there were some other things, such as toffee apples. In the past, toffee apples were often given to children because it was close to Halloween, which was the time when apples were harvested. Then people would put the apples on bamboo sticks and rotate them in the toffee syrup. Then they would go to Okhotsk to get some nuts. It was a little like Huaxia's candied haws. According to Sh. Clive, when she was young, every family would give toffee apples to their children. But she didn't know when it started, but some adults were bad. But if they put needles and blades in the apples, children would accidentally cut themselves or hurt themselves when eating. Americans cherished themselves very much. Decades ago, they said that freshwater was polluted and freshwater fish couldn't be eaten. But until now, not many people ate freshwater fish. As for the bones, only Asian carp had them. Many freshwater fish only had one bone, just like seafood. But people still didn't eat them. It was because Americans were careful that they didn't give toffee apples during the holidays. Next was pumpkin pie. Americans especially liked pie. This kind of food from Eastern Europe was very popular in the streets and alleys of the United States. Almost all the fast food restaurants in the United States had this kind of thing, but to be honest, Jianghu didn't like it very much. In his opinion, this kind of dessert was too sweet, and the taste was too greasy. He would rather eat cake than this kind of dessert. In Jianghu's manor, there were pumpkins. Moreover, they weren't small. Therefore, Jianghu didn't have anything to do with it. He came here mainly to buy candies and lights. Jianghu was a typical Sagittarius. If you directly asked him to spend a lot of money to buy something, he would be reluctant. But if you let him know that it was worth it, he would buy a lot of it, regardless of whether it was useful or not. Candy was on sale for Halloween, so Jianghu didn't check if anyone was eating it. Looking at the candy in front of him, Jianghu also grabbed it with his big hands. While Clive was looking for pumpkin lanterns for Jianghu had already grabbed dozens of caddies of candy. Most importantly, he had grabbed the best ones. Oh my God, are you going to open a candy store? Sh. Clive slapped her forehead when she saw several baskets full of candies. Although she knew that Jianghu wasn't short of money, this was too wasteful. Hee, it's okay. It's cheap now. After buying it, the people in the manor can also eat it, and the production date is very close. Looking at so many candies in front of him, Jianghu was a little embarrassed. The candies that Jianghu packed were all excellent things. Chocolate, all of them were Ferrero and Bean. The scientific name should be called Mimi, sugar on the outside and chocolate on the inside. Jianghu remembered that when he was in junior high school, he had a classmate who liked to eat this, but later their relationship became strained. This kind of chocolate came from the United States. It tasted good and was very popular among children. Because it was colorful and beautiful, there were also many other kinds of candies. When Jianghu bought things, he naturally only bought the expensive ones. As long as they tasted good, he didn't care about other things, although he felt that he had bought a little too much. But if he bought too much, he wouldn't care. Looking at Jianghu's appearance, Sh. Clive couldn't help but laugh. This guy was really cheap. These candies must have cost dozens of dollars. As expected, the total cost of the candies was $70, which was more than $400 in RMB. Including the Jacko, lanterns and the like, the total cost was $100. But Jianghu didn't care about this. He took the candies and pumpkin lanterns and left the store. Wow, so many delicious candies. Uncle, did you prepare this for Halloween? But as soon as he took out the candies, a group of children wearing masks ran across the street. This commercial street was prohibited from entering. The goods were all loaded from the back door of the store, so there were almost no bicycles on this commercial street. It was precisely because there were no cars that the adults were assured to let the children play here, even if there were many foreigners here. Among them, a sharp-eyed child saw the candies that Jianghu had brought out at a glance and couldn't help but take off the Iron Man mask on his face. Iron Man? Well, Jianghu didn't understand why it was Iron Man, but the child still looked at Jianghu in surprise. Yeah, you are welcome to visit when the time comes. Hearing the child's words, Jianghu also said with a smile. There is so much delicious food, we will definitely go, but uncle, where is your home? When the child heard that these candies were really prepared for Halloween, he couldn't help but get excited, and then his eyes flashed as he asked Jianghu. My home is at the end of that road, Soaring Dragon Manor. Pointing to the road out of the village, Jianghu said with a smile. Soaring Dragon Manor? But after hearing Jianghu's words, the child here looked at Jianghu with some confusion. Obviously, he didn't know much about this manor. Jianghu is still very mysterious in this town. I know, it's the biggest manor here. My father went to pull the replaced parts. At this time, another black child stood up, raised his hand, and said loudly. Pulled the parts? What do you mean? When he heard the child's words, Jianghu couldn't help but feel a little strange. What does he mean by pulling the parts? I really doubt if you are running a farm. In your manor, there are basically automatic machines. There will always be times when machines break down. The broken parts naturally need to be replaced with new ones, but the rusty parts that are replaced are directly thrown away. The country doesn't allow it. Moreover, they are also iron, so naturally, they can be sold for money. Although her family didn't run a manor, it was obvious that Sh20 Clive knew more than him. When he heard her words, Jianghu suddenly thought that it seemed to be true. Before he bought the cow, he saw a pile of rusty scrap metal in the warehouse of his manor. At that time, he muttered that he didn't know where they came from. So those were the parts that had been replaced from the rust. You are a rich person. If the parts are rusty, you will directly replace them with new ones. But most farm owners don't have that much money. They buy the parts that are no longer used in your big manor and then remove the rust. Basically, they can use it for 2 to 3 years. Seeing that Jianghu remembered, Sh20 Clive also smiled and said to him. Oh, Uncle's manor is the Soaring Dragon Manor. You are welcome to come and play. Jianghu touched his nose a little awkwardly. He wasn't a loser. He was, but he definitely wasn't a representative of struggling. He had almost never struggled. From the beginning, he wasn't that short of money. He sold the gems for 330 million. He bought the manor for 280 million. Although the remaining 50 million wasn't a lot, it was definitely not a small amount. When he had spent most of his money, he would have another source of income. Until now. Jianghu really wasn't short of money. He still had more than 1 billion in savings in his bank account. Therefore, he didn't work hard on small and medium farms. He wasn't very clear about the operation of these manors. Now that he heard Sh20 Clive's words, Jianghu subconsciously ignored it. He squatted down and looked at the children in front of him. He took out a handful of candies from the bag and stuffed them into the children's hands. Then he smiled and said. Hearing Jianghu's words, the children naturally nodded with joy. Then they happily watched Jianghu leave. Jianghu also waved to them before leaving the commercial street. When he left the commercial street, Jianghu wanted to invite Sh20 Clive for a meal, but she refused. She said that she already had an appointment with her family. Jianghu couldn't say anything. In the beginning, he decided to let nature take its course with Sh20 Clive. He also considered the current situation between him and Sh20 Clive. Although it was somewhat difficult to accept, it was still in Jianghu's thoughts. Returning to the car alone, Jianghu threw the things into the back seat, then started the engine and left the town. After returning to the manor, seeing that Jianghu had brought back so many candies, Daliana, Marian, Bernice, and Xiaoya were very interested. They took the jack-o'-lanterns and began to decorate. As for the origin of the jack-o'-lanterns, Sh20 Clive also told Jianghu that it was a story from Ireland. In Ireland, there was a man named Jack. He was very stingy, very stingy. As long as he didn't spend money, he would even dare to play tricks on demons. It was precisely because of this that after he died, heaven didn't want him because he was too stingy. Hell didn't want him because he played tricks on demons. In the end, he could only take his only property, a white radish. He hollowed it out and used a candle as a lamp to illuminate the ground. At first, this lamp was made from white radish and cabbage. However, after Europeans came to North America, they found that pumpkins were very good. It was precisely because of this that jack-o'-lanterns were invented. Now, jack-o'-lanterns were popularized all over the world. The jack-o'-lanterns that Jianghu bought were all very good. There was no need to use a candle. It had its own lamp and battery. As long as the switch was turned on, it could always be illuminated. The four girls and Jianghu's interest in jack-o'-lanterns hadn't died down yet. So after packing up the candies, they took these jack-o'-lanterns and decorated the manor. Especially the periphery of the manor, there were a lot of decorations. It really looked like a festival. Chapter 6:16. Xiao Bai, Xiao Huang, be careful. Qiuqiu, you have to keep an eye on the sky. Jianghu tightened his grip on his gun and whispered to the dogs beside him. Then he took a deep breath and walked into the forest in front of him. Today was the 29th of October. It was getting closer and closer to the end of October. Jianghu's manor was still as busy as ever. The cowboys looked after the cattle, the fishermen checked the movements of the underwater fish. Although the wine had already been stored in barrels, Aphrodite and the others were not idle. It was already late autumn and the vegetables in the garden had to be harvested. Winthrop was not like some cities in the south where vegetables could be grown all year round. Here, vegetables and food were only grown for one season. After the vegetables were picked, they were sent to the warehouse for storage. Basically, they were vegetables that were easy to store. For example, radishes, pumpkins, cabbages, sprouts, potatoes, sweet potatoes, cabbages, winter melons, and so on. These vegetables were Jianghu's winter food. They were placed in the special warehouse and the temperature could be lowered. It was just like the cellar that Jianghu's family dug to store vegetables when they lived in a bungalow. It was no problem to store them for one winter. However, Jianghu would feel a little uncomfortable if he did not eat fresh vegetables. He was already considering whether to build a greenhouse next spring. This way, he could eat fresh vegetables all year round. Moreover, he did not plant much and he did not sell them for money. Therefore, the fertility of the land should not be a problem. Because Aphrodite and the others had been preparing these vegetables recently, Lilia, Bernice, Daliana, and Marion would also help. In the whole manor, the only idle person should be Jianghu. Oh, there were also two idle people, Dulles Gerard and Connor Murphy. They were in the wine cellar every day, drinking red wine. According to their words, they wanted to know when this batch of red wine would be divided and what standard it was. Jianghu didn't understand these messy things. After all, there were specializations in this industry. As for Jianghu, a few days ago, when he went to prepare for Halloween, it was just a small episode. Recently, after waking up every morning, he went to help tie up the grass. It was almost winter and there were still a lot of things to prepare in the manor. But at around 9 o'clock in the morning, the cowboys all went to herd the cattle. Jianghu could not tie up the grass himself, so he had nothing to do. After staying at home for a few days, Jianghu suddenly remembered that he seemed to have said a few months ago that he wanted to see his own forest. He had not seen it for so long, so he could give it a try this time. When Jianghu first entered the forest, he was led by Robbins Garcia and Edouard Anderson. But now, Jianghu was much more powerful than he was a year ago. Not only had his physical fitness reached 4 times the human limit. His experience was also much stronger than before. This also gave him the courage to enter the forest alone. Thinking of this, Jianghu picked up his gun, put on his outdoor clothes, and left with Xiao Huang, Xiao Bai, and Qiuqiu. Recently, Dai Feng was transferred away by Azalina, and no one knew what he was doing mysteriously. When he passed by the swimming pool, the Greenland seal that Jianghu bought was playing happily with 2 dolphins. These 3 little guys, since coming to Jianghu's manor, really came to enjoy life. Every day, in addition to eating, playing, and sleeping, their days were quite good. But fortunately, they also knew that Jianghu was their master. When they saw Jianghu coming over, they all looked at Jianghu. After greeting them, Jianghu took the 2 dogs and an eagle into the forest. As soon as they entered the forest, the sky, which was originally quite bright outside, became a lot darker. This was also Jianghu's fault. This was because when Jianghu nourished the ranch, the forest was not left behind, and it was also bathed in the light of the spirit energy. The spirit energy could improve the pasture, cattle, and fish. Naturally, it could also improve these trees. In this year, these trees grew quite fast. Fortunately, the people in Jianghu's manor watched the trees grow every day and did not feel anything, and the people outside could not see the appearance of the forest. Otherwise, a botanist would find that the trees in Jianghu's manor grew better in 1 year than in 3 years in other places. Now, it was not an exaggeration to describe Jianghu's forest as leafy and lush. The leaves that sheltered the sun completely blocked the sun. Only spots of sunlight shone into the forest through the gaps of the top leaves. But even so, in the forest, the grass that was almost waist-high still blocked Jianghu's vision. Carrying the gun on his back, Jianghu picked up the cold-forged knife that he specially bought and began to cut the grass to open a path. Modern knives and ancient cold weapons were actually very different. The hardness of a knife mainly depended on the material and forging method. The abbreviation of this hardness was called HRC. It did not mean that the higher the hardness, the better the knife. If the hardness was high, the saber would be brittle. If the saber was flexible, the hardness would be low. This was inevitable. The cold weapons of ancient Wuxia could be said to be extremely well developed. The best sabers should be during the Tang and Song dynasties. However, after the Tang and Song dynasties, it was definitely a chaotic era. After the Tang dynasty, it was the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. After the Song dynasty, it was replaced by the Yuan dynasty, so these forging methods were not passed down. Although he was unwilling to admit it, the best knives in modern times were made by Japan, which followed the forging methods of the Tang dynasty. During the anti-Japanese war, the samurai swords of Japan were much better in quality than the knives used in China. Of course, now they were all made by machines, and the hardness could be as much as one wanted. The toughness of the average saber was between 50 and 60. This was also the best saber that could be bought. However, Jianghu's knife was different. His Nippon knife, also called the *********, was specially ordered by the manufacturer behind the outdoor goods store in the town. Its hardness was 65 HRC. Cutting iron nails and the like was not much harder than cutting a piece of wood. Moreover, it was very flexible and did not reflect light, because it was not only made of steel, but also some other metals to ensure its toughness. It was not an exaggeration to say that this knife could cut through hair. Jianghu's knife continued to swing. Soon, the grass in front of him fell down, giving him a path to move around. However, just when Jianghu was happily chopping, Chirps, who was flying in the air, suddenly screamed. Hearing its slightly panicked cry, Jianghu could not help but frown and instantly picked up the gun. And Goldie and Xiao Bai, who had been following him, suddenly crouched on the ground. Their noses kept moving, trying to smell something different, but unfortunately, they sniffed for a long time and did not find anything. They raised their heads with some doubts, but just as they raised their heads, Goldie suddenly pounced on Jianghu. Jianghu was also looking around, so he did not notice. In an instant, he was pushed down by Goldie. After being pushed down, Jianghu panicked for a moment, but he wasn't worried. After all, he knew that Goldie wouldn't harm him. But when he looked up, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was wondering why he did not find any clues when he looked around. Even Goldie and Xiao Bai did not find anything, but Chirp saw it. It turned out that his enemy was coiled up in a tree at this time. Yes, coiled up in a tree, because it was a snake, a huge snake. F***ck, it's a water dragon. Why is this thing here? Looking at the huge monster that was about 5 meters long coiled up in the tree and looking up at him, Jianghu instantly had goosebumps all over his body. Originally, he just wanted to see the mountain lion and its babies. Why is there such a monster in the forest? Shouldn't this thing exist in South America? What the hell is this? Just when Jianghu was puzzled, the snake was very excited. It kept sticking out its tongue, then tied its lower body to the tree, and slowly swam towards Jianghu. Seeing this guy move, Jianghu instantly raised his gun. When the gun was raised, the snake stopped moving, but it did not leave either. It just looked at Jianghu and kept circling there. Looking at its appearance, Jianghu could not help but be a little puzzled. What is this guy's background? Why is it here? This guy is clearly from South America, so why is it in my manor? And most importantly, shouldn't this guy be hibernating now? Why is it still living so happily? He glanced at Goldie and Xiaobai beside him and found that the nervous dog was squatting down as if nothing had happened. It was as if they did not see the big snake in front of them. F***ck, what's going on? Did you guys betray me? Looking at the two dogs playing happily beside him, Jianghu said gloomily. My luck is too bad. How did I encounter such a probability? This is too unlucky. Hiss, hiss. Seeing that Jianghu was still a little vigilant, the giant water serpent slowly swam down from the tree. Its emotionless eyes glanced at Jianghu, but Jianghu saw a trace of emotion in its eyes. It seemed to be saying that there was no harm to it, which made Jianghu a little puzzled. Looking at Jianghu's puzzled eyes, the water serpent came to the ground and then slowly swam forward. It deliberately walked a very wide path and pressed the grass under its body, as if it was opening a path for Jianghu. After walking for a short distance, it deliberately looked at Jianghu, as if waiting for him. Didn't they say that after the establishment of the imperial court, animals are not allowed to become spirits? Well, maybe this is the United States, and it's not under the control of the imperial court. Looking at the human-like water serpent, Jianghu frowned. It wants me to follow it? Although he was a little nervous, Jianghu was still prepared to take a look. Holding the gun, he looked around vigilantly and followed the water serpent into the distance. Chapter 6:17. Where is it taking me? You two guys are too unreliable. Are you going to defect to the enemy at the last minute? While walking carefully, Jianghu muttered softly. At the same time, he looked at Goldie and Xiaobai who were still playing at his feet and couldn't help but kick them. After being kicked, Goldie and Xiaobai both looked at Jianghu with confusion in their eyes. They didn't know what they did wrong. Phew. Looking at them, Jianghu took a deep breath and continued to follow this guy inside. This forest wasn't very big, but it wasn't particularly small either. Jianghu had never entered the depths of the forest before. It seemed that today was the furthest he had ever walked. As he kept walking, Jianghu found an open space in the forest unknowingly. The vegetation on the ground here seemed to have been deliberately removed, and in the middle of this empty space, there was a large puddle. Well, if it was a lake, then this place was too small. At most, it was a puddle. Jianghu didn't know how the puddle was formed. Maybe it was because of the underground water, but at this time, the puddle was a little muddy. And in the distance of the puddle, there was a huge hole. This hole was directly dug out, and there were even some grass and the like inside. When Jianghu walked to this open space, a few green lights appeared in the hole. There's an ambush? Looking at the green lights, Jianghu's heart thumped. He wanted to see what the hell was going on. If the situation was bad, he would run away quickly. But before he could run, the owner of the green lights had already walked out of the cave. When he saw the owner of the green lights, although Jianghu was still shocked, he didn't care anymore. Because the owner of these green lights was none other than the North American mountain lion that Jianghu once fed spiritual energy here. At this time, the original lion cubs had grown to the size of a medium-sized dog. When they saw that it was Jianghu, they opened their mouths and ran over quickly with their tongues hanging out. The last one to come out was the huge North American mountain lion. It was the guy that Du Feynman thought was a North American lion-like creature. However, this guy had simply absorbed a little bit of Jianghu's spiritual energy. In addition, He hunted rabbits and pheasants that contained spiritual energy every day, so he broke through the limits of his body. It's you guys. Looking at the little guys running over, Jianghu also squatted down and hugged the little guys running over, then rubbed their heads hard. At this time, the little guys were also jumping around Jianghu excitedly. Looking at the appearance of these little guys, Jianghu laughed. He didn't expect them to grow so fast. Ao. At this time, the North American mountain lion mother walked over and used its huge head to nudge Jianghu. Then, it cried out twice to show its welcome to Jianghu. Jianghu couldn't help but laugh. He was born to like these fierce animals, especially when these big cats were acting cute. It was really quite strange. Okay, you guys live here. What's the situation with the water gloom? After patting these guys' heads, Jianghu looked at the water gloom in the distance. He remembered that this guy brought him here. It seemed that the mountain lion family didn't have any hostility towards the water gloom. This made Jianghu a little hesitant. What's going on? Maybe it felt that Jianghu was looking over. The water gloom swam to the side of the waterhole at this time and looked at Jianghu. Then, it used its tail to whip the water surface of the waterhole twice. Then, a huge figure floated out of the waterhole. When he saw this figure, Jianghu couldn't help but gasp because the figure that floated out of the waterhole was none other than a huge crocodile. He had to admit that when a crocodile rose from the water, especially from the very turbid water, it was even more terrifying than the water gloom above his head. Looking at this guy floating up, Jianghu couldn't help but gulp. However, after this crocodile floated up, it didn't move when it saw Jianghu. Instead, it looked at Jianghu with its emotionless eyes and slowly climbed out of the water. It looked at him from afar, just like the water gloom. This scene seems a little familiar. Looking at the crocodile and the water gloom standing there, Jianghu's brain suddenly seemed to stop working. A scene suddenly emerged in his mind. The crocodile and the water gloom, two creatures that shouldn't have appeared here, appeared in front of him. This made Jianghu a little confused, but the moment the scene appeared in his sealed memory, Jianghu remembered them. Ah, in that wild animal warehouse. Oh my god, it's you guys. Looking at the appearance of the snake and the crocodile, Jianghu instantly slapped his head. He suddenly understood why Little Yellow, Little White, and Chirps didn't make any movements at all. Instead, it was as if they didn't see them at all. Jianghu looked at the snake and crocodile. Also, why did the snake and crocodile coexist peacefully, and why was the mountain lion here? There was only one answer: spiritual energy. Animals were much more sensitive than humans. Although Jianghu didn't know how these two guys escaped, after escaping, they clearly found Jianghu and felt that the spiritual energy in Jianghu's place was different from other places. The reason why they coexisted peacefully was because they felt the familiar feeling in each other's bodies. It was precisely because of this that the three of them were in the forest, and the water gloom led Jianghu here after seeing him. It's you guys. Letting go of the small mountain lion beside him, Jianghu walked in front of the two big guys and touched their heads hard. However, snakes and crocodiles are cold-blooded animals after all. They are not kittens or puppies. They are not used to being touched by others. After being touched by Jianghu twice, they took the initiative to move away. Although I don't know how you came here, this is not bad. There is enough food in this forest for you to eat. You can live here in the future. Looking at the two guys in front of him, Jianghu said with a smile. To be honest, Jianghu originally wanted to raise these two guys. Now it seems like a good choice. The sand tiger shark has aura, so I raised it into a great white shark. The mountain lion has aura, so I raised it into a North American lion. I'm going to focus on the two of you. What will you become in the future? What is the biggest snake? It seems that the water gloom is the biggest snake. Then what is bigger than the water gloom? What is the biggest crocodile? Looking at the crocodile and snake in front of him, Jianghu said with a smile. This time, with these three guys guarding his forest, it should be safe. Now he has begun to name these guys, but maybe because he is not in the right state today, he did not succeed. But he was still looking forward to it. If this big snake grows bigger than the average snake, and if this crocodile also develops a second time, Jianghu remembered that the biggest snake was the titanoboa. Legend has it that after the extinction of the dinosaurs, it was the most powerful cold-blooded animal. The largest snake can grow to more than 10 meters. If Jianghu trains it carefully, this water gloom may have a chance to return to the glory of its ancestors. Thinking about it, at that time, the plot of the Anaconda disaster movie may not necessarily not happen in reality. As for the crocodile, the biggest one should be the giant crocodile, which is also more than 10 meters long. It is used to kill dinosaurs to eat. Jianghu does not have any dinosaurs here. But if this crocodile can also grow to more than 10 meters long, just thinking about it is a very good thing. Jianghu played with them for a while. When he was about to leave, he injected some aura into the 3 guys and 1 beast. Those small mountain lions have not grown up yet, so Jianghu gave them all some aura. After everything was done, Jianghu left the forest with Xiao Bai, Goldie, and Qiuqiu. I wonder what this forest will look like in the future. Thinking about it, I am really looking forward to it. At this time, Jianghu's manor is considered impregnable. The front side is defended by Jianghu, his cowboys, and his sailors. In the sea, there are 2 big sharks, more than 10 dolphins, and a sea monster, the king's sour squid, to defend. On the land, there is the water gloom, the crocodile, and the mountain lions to defend. Now, Jianghu wants to let people try and test his strength. However, just as Jianghu is in high spirits, there are people in Boston who do not look so good. Since Celanese' last attack was disrupted by Jianghu, Celanese has no means to do anything in Winthrop. No matter what they say, no one will listen to them, including Celanese delegation and the gangsters. They can't even buy a bottle of water in Winthrop. Because of this, after that night, Celanese delegation left on the 3rd day. However, the gangsters stayed in town. Every day, they rely on Augustine to buy things from Boston and bring them back to eat and drink. Their lives are really not good. The person in charge of Celanese, Peter ****, who had been chased out of the town, found Faraday Kirk, who had asked them to take over Winthrop and guaranteed their success. Originally, Faraday Kirk wanted to deny it, but he did not expect that the people of Celanese had recorded their conversation. The people of Celanese said to either help them settle the matter, or report him to the authorities. The money he received was enough to keep him in prison for the rest of his life. He wanted to pay compensation, but Celanese people did not want it. Therefore, he could only bitterly ask for his connections. He went to Winthrop and asked his old friend for help. But after listening to his words, his old friend didn't say anything. He just showed Faraday the list of taxes that Jianghu will have to pay next year. This made Faraday completely stunned. Next year, Jianghu will have to pay more than 600 million yuan in taxes. 400 million was to be paid to the federal government, and about 200 million was to be paid to the state. Although Boston is a metropolitan area, it is definitely at the bottom of the top 10 metropolitan areas in the United States. It was not New York, and it did not care about a few $100 million. They cared a lot. It could be said that Jianghu was their god of wealth. Just like Jianghu said, no one dared to touch him. Chapter 618. Are you sure someone will come tonight? You're so ferocious. Why would the kids come looking for you? While hanging the freshly made pumpkin on the door, Bernice looked at Jianghu strangely and asked. As early as a few days ago, Jianghu said that there will be kids coming to ask for candy tonight, but Bernice has been in a state of doubt. Because Jianghu's reputation in the town is indeed not very good, and the most important thing is that Jianghu is really too far from the town. If he drives slowly, it will take him half an hour. If he walks, it will take him more than an hour. Will the kids walk for more than an hour to ask for candy? Even if they are willing, their parents won't be willing. It should be, maybe, probably, almost, someone will come. Hearing what Bernice said, Jianghu touched his nose a little awkwardly. To be honest, he was also on a whim, but whether someone will come or not, he is not sure. Only you will believe the words of children. Okay, I'm hanging it up, I hope someone will come, but I'll take a picture first. Hearing Jianghu's slightly awkward words, Bernice glanced at him contemptuously, then smiled and hung the last pumpkin. After jumping down, she took a picture of the pumpkin, then smiled happily. Okay, no one will come, just treat it as our own holiday. Touching his nose, Jianghu smiled. Hearing what Jianghu said, Daliana, Marian, and Lilia all laughed. After everything was arranged, Jianghu and the others also returned to the villa. Because they have been really busy recently, Aphrodite and the others haven't come over for a while. Jianghu and the others just nestled on the sofa and watched TV casually. It is different from July 15th in China. Although it is also the Ghost Festival, no one will celebrate it on July 15th in China. At most, they will go to the cemetery or the crossroads to burn some paper, that's all. But in the United States, Halloween was still a popular holiday. Not only did people celebrate it, but there were also movies about ghosts on TV. Basically, all the TV stations today were showing movies or dramas about ghosts and monsters. This was also more appropriate for the occasion. Just like in China, there were always New Year's movies being played during the New Year. Jianghu didn't know much about American horror movies. He had only seen a few of them before. Alien, Resident Evil, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and so on. Especially A Nightmare on Elm Street, it was all because a long time ago, there was a popular novel writing style in China called Infinite Flow. It was very popular after it came out. Because of the trend, many people wrote about it. Only then did Jianghu notice the existence of A Nightmare on Elm Street. However, although Jianghu said that he was not afraid of anything, he was somewhat afraid of horror movies, so he nestled on the sofa and casually turned on the TV, hoping to see some movies that were not so scary. No one knows that Jianghu actually likes to watch comedies the most. This is also his hobby. But today, the TV station didn't like him, so they didn't show any comedies. Most of them were horror movies. After watching one round, he actually saw a movie about long legs on a pay channel. This made Jianghu stunned for a moment, then he turned on the channel. This is a Wuxia movie. It looks like it has been released for a long time. Looking at the movie on the projection TV, Bernice said with some doubts while eating chocolate. Hearing her words, Jianghu couldn't help but look at her with contempt. Don't tell me you haven't seen this movie, it is quite popular. Pointing at the movie in front of him, Jianghu said very seriously. Hearing Jianghu's words, Bernice blinked, as if she really didn't know. I know this. This is a Chinese ghost story, this is Wang Zuxian. Although he is not young, he is really good looking. At this time, Xiaoya, who was sitting next to him, said with a smile. You weren't born in the United States, how can you not know this movie? Jianghu made a gesture to Xiaoya, then said to Bernice. This movie was very popular in China. Of course, Jianghu didn't know the box office, but the number of times it was replayed on TV was quite a lot. There were a total of 3 movies. To be honest, the first one was not very good, and the second one was too bloody. The best part was the third one. The male lead was changed from Zhang Guorong to Liang Chaowei, and the female lead was still the super invincible long-legged Wang Zuxian, and Li Lianjie's current wife, Li Ji, was also in the movie, showing her very scary cleavage and also attracting attention with her long legs. To be honest, this third movie was very good, and it was always replayed on TV. The combination of Liang Chaowei and Zhang Shuya was also very funny. This movie was more funny than Ghost movie. I didn't want to watch movies when I was young. Bernice rolled her eyes at Jianghu, then sat there and watched. Jianghu didn't say much after hearing her words, so he also sat there and watched. The movie just started, and Jianghu was also very happy to watch it. The most important thing is that this movie is dubbed in Mandarin, which is the version that Jianghu is most familiar with. Although there are English subtitles below, Delina and Marian are not so happy to watch it. Just as Shifang in the movie turned into a golden Buddha and killed the Black Mountain Demon, the whole movie officially came to an end. But at this moment, Jianghai's doorbell suddenly rang, and the 5 people on the sofa were startled. Who is it at this time? Looking at the watch, it was almost 9 o'clock. Shouldn't the children be asleep at this time? Why is someone ringing Jianghai's doorbell? Although he was startled, Jianghai quickly calmed down, then walked to the door and turned on the video. Don't give me candy or make trouble. When the video was connected, many children dressed strangely shouted loudly. Look, they are finally here. But Jianghai couldn't help grinning when he saw this scene. Originally, he thought that these children might really not come tonight, but he didn't expect that these children didn't let him down. Grabbing the pot of candy still in Bernice's arms, Jianghai opened the door and walked out. Seriously. That said, Daliana, your father seems to be very fond of children. Looking at Jianghai who went out, Bernice elbowed Delina next to her and said to her. It should be, Jianghai is also very good to us. Hearing Bernice's words, Delina thought for a while and said. In her eyes, Jianghai should be the best person in the world, the person who rescued them from the abyss of hell. And judging from Jianghai's usual character, although his reaction to naughty children is ordinary, he seems to really like children. You have to work hard. Jianghai likes children so much, it is very likely that the matriarch of this family is the mother of Jianghai's first child. If you don't do it now, it will be too late. At this moment, Marian also poked her head over and looked at Bernice and said. Who is going to give birth to his child? Don't talk nonsense, what do children know? Hearing the words of these two, Bernice's face turned red all of a sudden, and then she wanted to take something to eat in a panic, but she couldn't find anything because Jianghai had already taken away the snack plate. Looking at her sister's flustered look, little Ye was obviously a little worried. At this time, Jianghai had already walked out of his villa. Looking at the children dressed as little skeletons, wizards, ghosts, vampires, witches, and so on outside the door, Jianghai walked quickly to the door. The candy is here, eat it quickly. After opening the door and looking at the children in front of him, Jianghai directly handed over the plate and said to them. Hearing Jianghai's words, the children also cheered and began to grab the candy to eat. Hey, Jianghai, I really didn't expect you to be so childish. At this moment, a voice said to Jianghai. Jianghai looked up and found that in addition to these children, there were also 2 adults here. One of them was Mayor Wallace, and the other was a black man driving a pickup truck. When he saw Jianghai looking over, he couldn't help but nod shyly. Why are you here? Hello. Seeing these 2 people, Jianghai also walked over and said with some curiosity. His first sentence was naturally to Mayor Wallace, and the second sentence was to the black man. Hello, Mr. Jianghai. Hearing Jianghai take the initiative to greet him, the black man was a little caught off guard. He immediately stretched out his hand and shook hands with Jianghai. After Jianghai shook hands with him, he looked at Mayor Wallace strangely. Do you think the parents in town will allow children to walk more than an hour to you at night to ask for candy? Rolling his eyes at Jianghai, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but say to him. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jianghai touched the back of his head embarrassedly. This was also why he thought that no one would come tonight. It is indeed too far. He glanced around his manor. It was dark, and it was indeed not safe. Too far is one thing. Hearing Jianghai's words, Mayor Wallace nodded, then shook his head and continued, another thing is that you haven't really integrated into Winthrop yet. Looking at Jianghai, Mayor Wallace said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Jianghai was a little puzzled. You have indeed made a great contribution to Winthrop, but I can be sure that you know less than 20 people in Winthrop. You should know that our town has thousands of people. Looking at Jianghai, Mayor Wallace said very seriously. Hearing his words, Jianghai calculated for a moment. It seems that, probably, maybe, it's really close. In addition to his own employees, he knows 20 people. Chapter 619. It seems that there aren't even 20 of them. Muttering in his heart, Jiang Hai touched his nose and said apologetically. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also shook his head with a smile. This Jiang Hai is really casual. Although the previous incident has been resolved, you're only treating the symptoms and not the root cause. If you really want the townsfolk to not be afraid of you but to truly support you in the future, then you need to integrate with them. Mayor Wallace said with a serious face as he took out a cigarette from his pocket and put it in his mouth. Integrate with them? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai frowned and touched his chin. To be honest, he had been a bit of a hermit these years. He didn't know how to integrate with these people. He didn't have many friends over the years. Now that he had to step forward and integrate with these townspeople, it was really not an easy thing for Jiang Hai. Now that he heard Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was a bit hesitant. You have to rely on yourself. Seeing that Jiang Hai really listened to his words and was thinking about it, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but nod with satisfaction. To be honest, if Jiang Hai wasn't a citizen of Wuxia, he would have wanted to pass the position of mayor to Jiang Hai. Because of Jiang Hai's identity, he had more authority in the town than he did. But now, even if he couldn't pass the position of mayor to Jiang Hai, he didn't want to be a scapegoat between Jiang Hai and the townspeople. He needed to make Jiang Hai and the townspeople harmonious. Compared to reforming thousands of townspeople, it was easier to let Jiang Hai take a step forward. I really don't know how to integrate. After thinking for a few minutes, Jiang Hai sighed helplessly. In fact, from the composition of his friends, it could be seen that he didn't have any friends in society. His friends were either childhood friends or classmates. He didn't really have any friends in society. He didn't even have any friends from university, although he went to university for 4 years. So now Jiang Hai, to put it bluntly, he didn't know how to make friends with adults. Of course, he might know more about the other type of friends, but that was only for women, that was all. Mr. Jiang, if you really want to integrate into the town, maybe you can try to attend some gatherings. Looking at Jiang Hai's confused look, the black guy over there hesitated and said to Jiang Hai. This black guy was called Haj Circe. He was only 24 years old, but he was quite famous in the town. It was because he opened a machine parts recycling factory. It was similar to the waste collection factories in China, but they only collected machine parts. For example, the tractor in Jiang Hai's manor was used for a year, so some parts were rusty. These rusty parts could easily break if they were used again, which was very dangerous. In the past, Robbins Garcia would take these parts off, then beat the rust off and continue to use them for a few years, but it was dangerous. So after Jiang Hai had this manor, the only thing he could do was to replace all the rusty parts with new ones. Agricultural machines were quite dirty in a year, so the parts were also very worn out. Not long ago, before buying the cattle, all the machines in Jiang Hai's manor had just been replaced with new parts. If all the parts were replaced with new ones, then the old ones would be troublesome. It was not allowed to be thrown away in the United States. Things like computers and TVs were not allowed to be thrown away in the United States. If you didn't use them, you would have to send them to a recycling factory, and then you would have to pay to destroy them. It was the same for these things, so there were many second-hand goods in the United States. There were also people who bought these old parts, such as Haj Circe. After he bought these parts and beat the rust off, they could still be used. He could sell them to others, unlike Jiang Hai, who was a rich manor owner. The iron that could not be used could also be melted and sold back to the steel factories for secondary use. He only made a small profit in the middle, but even so, he could still make about $100,000 a year. And because many people needed him, he was quite popular in the town. The reason he was here today was mainly because of his son, who was a little black guy in the group of kids. That day when Jiang Hai was buying candy, he was discovered by these little guys. In fact, these little guys had been waiting to ask Jiang Hai for candy. Every year, these kids would be followed by an adult to prevent them from asking for something they shouldn't. This year, it was Circe's turn. However, as he watched the children finish off the people in the town, the children walked out of the town and wanted to ask Jianghu for candy. However, they were stopped by Circe, because in his impression, Jianghu was not easy to get along with. However, the children said that they had made an appointment with Jianghu and wanted to come over to ask for candy, which made him a little confused. Fortunately, at this time, they met Mayor Wallace, who was returning home from work. After knowing that Jianghu's character was actually not bad, they brought the children together. As a result, when they first met, he found that Jianghu's character seemed to be really good. A party? Those bars? Hearing Circe's words, Jianghu was a little puzzled. He didn't like to go to those bars. You can say that, Americans like to have bars very much, and these bars are the best place to make friends. Hearing Jianghu's words, Circe also said with a smile. But bars are very noisy, I don't like to go to noisy places. Seeing Circe's praise for bars, Jianghu frowned. To be honest, he didn't like to go to nightclubs, bars, or bars. He thought it was too noisy. Oh, Mr. Jiang, the party we hold won't be too noisy. After all, it's held in someone else's house. No one wants to have their house renovated after they leave. We're not those high school kids who will turn the house upside down. Circe shrugged. In fact, in the United States, there are many kinds of bars, all kinds of bars. It's just that Jianghu was mistaken by what others said before. Just like Circe said, no one wants to turn the house upside down when they hold a party at home. After all, they still have to live in the house after they leave. If it's not very noisy, and it's just a heart-to-heart talk with the neighbors, I'm quite willing to give it a try. Hearing Circe's words, Jianghu's eyes lit up. If it's just to meet some strangers, Jianghu doesn't mind. Hearing Jianghu's words, Mayor Wallace also nodded. It's naturally best that Jianghu thinks this way. If Mr. Jiang wants to go, there's a charity party tomorrow at Old George's place. Mr. Jiang can go and have some fun. Circe was also a little excited when he heard that Jianghu seemed to be interested in going. After all, although he was only 24 years old, he already had a 4-year-old son. He was much more mature than the average 24-year-old college student. He knew that making friends with a rich man like Jianghu would only bring him benefits and no harm, especially when this man was in control of the town's economy. Therefore, he immediately recommended Jianghu with all his might. Charity party? Hearing Circe's words, Jianghu was a little confused. What does this party mean? Is it to donate money? In the United States, a lot of people like to hold charity parties. However, it's not a collection of donations, but an auction. The host and guests will take out some small things that are not very valuable to auction. After the auction, the money can be taken away by themselves, or donated to charity organizations in their own name. Of course, people who buy things directly without auctioning them are the most popular. Seeing that Jianghu was a little confused, Mayor Wallace also explained to Jianghu. In the United States, people really like to donate money. Firstly, it's the most direct way to gain a good reputation. Secondly, it's also because of the United States political policy. Donating money can be used to offset taxes. Of course, the amount is limited. Otherwise, the country won't have the money to pay salaries. The most important thing is that the tax rate for donating money is at least 1 to 1%. Sometimes it's 1 to 1. 2, 1 to 1. 5, or even 1 to 2%. This way, the people who donate money can save a lot of money. Not only can they gain a good reputation, but they can also earn money. There's nothing better than this. Therefore, the rich people in the United States are very enthusiastic about donating money. Of course, the charity auction held by Old George is definitely selling some small things. The final transaction price is about a few $1,000s. They just want to show their sincerity. However, this matter made Jianghu very interested. After listening to Mayor Wallace's words, Jianghu understood the meaning of this charity auction. He can't do other things, but he's still very interested in throwing money, especially when he can't pay much. Okay, I'll call Old George later. I'll go tomorrow. He clapped his hands. Just like what Mayor Wallace said, if Jianghu doesn't integrate into the town, there will be some trouble. Anyway, he has nothing to do now, so it doesn't matter if he goes to take a look. Therefore, he thought for a while and decided to go and take a look. He has nothing to do anyway. Great, Mr. Jiang, I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Hodge Circe. This is my business card. See you tomorrow. Seeing that Jianghu agreed to participate, Hodge Circe couldn't help but feel excited. Jianghu has decided to participate. He didn't need to think to know that when people see Jianghu tomorrow, they'll be confused. When asked who asked Jianghu to participate, he would say that it was him. Moreover, the most important thing was that Jianghu agreed to participate. Jianghu would surely remember that it was him who suggested that he participate. Okay, Mr. Circe, see you tomorrow. Looking at the excited Hodge Circe, Jianghu also smiled. How could he not know what this man was thinking? But Jianghu didn't mind. He was basking in his own glory. Anyway, he had nothing to lose. Chapter 620. You really don't want to go with me? Party, aren't you interested? Looking at the 4 women who were packing up for him, Jianghu asked with some doubts. Didn't they say that girls like to join in the fun? Why don't they like to join in the fun? I'm a researcher, that kind of place is not suitable for me. Hearing Jianghu's words, Bernice spoke first. I'd better not go, it feels uncomfortable to be stared at by others. Lilia also said at this time. If we go, it's inevitable that some boys will come and surround us. It's annoying, after all, we are your daughters. Listening to Bernice and Lilia's words, Daliana and Marian also looked at each other, then said to Jianghu. Okay. Hearing that the 4 of them didn't want to go, Jianghu couldn't help but feel a little depressed. It seems that he is the only one going today. Well, aren't you going with a mission? Go early and come back early. Don't be a womanizer. After you go, have a good talk with them. Patting Jianghu's clothes, Bernice said to Jianghu as if she was the mistress of the house. Hearing her words, Jianghu also smiled helplessly. Do I look like a person who will fight? Okay, I'm leaving. Looking at the cash on him again, well, there are 3,000 yuan, which should be enough. Then Jianghu left the villa, got in his car, and went to old George's horse farm. Last night, Hodge Circe told Jianghu about Jianghu's integration into this town. Jianghu went back and thought about it. In fact, there was nothing to think about. After all, he didn't need to pay anything. He didn't have anything to do recently, so it didn't matter if he went to the local party. So after they left, Jianghu went back and called old George and asked about tomorrow's party. When old George learned that Jianghu was coming, he was extremely excited. After all, it was Jianghu, a person who couldn't be invited. Immediately, Yuelong clapped his hands and invited Jianghu to come over. This matter was settled. Early this morning, after Jianghu got up, he went to the warehouse in the cowshed as usual to tie grass, then he went back to take a shower and change clothes. After staying at home for half a day at noon and afternoon, he went out at 4 o'clock in the evening. Taking advantage of the sunset, Jianghu drove to old George's horse farm. Out of the gate of the manor, Jianghu opened the window on the highway. Although the temperature outside was a bit low, Jianghu enjoyed the cold wind. Compared to the air conditioner, he preferred the natural wind. Moreover, it wasn't unbearably cold now. If it was winter, then he wouldn't be so reckless. At this time, it was already November 1st. It was officially winter. Although it didn't snow, the temperature dropped quickly. At noon, when the sun was still up, it might be more than 10 degrees, but now that the sun was setting, the temperature was only about 5 or 6 degrees. Feeling the cold wind blowing around him, Jianghu also took a deep breath as he looked at the grassland and corn fields in the distance. Logically speaking, the corn should have been harvested last month, but that wasn't the case. the people who planted the corn would leave some corn in the field. The more mature the corn became, the harder it would become. Humans couldn't eat it anymore. Of course, the corn wasn't for humans to eat. They were prepared to harvest it before the snow, break it into pieces, and feed it to the cows. Jianghu didn't plant corn in his manor, but it didn't mean that he didn't know about it. After driving for about 10 minutes, Jianghu had already arrived at Old George's horse farm. At this time, there were many cars parked outside Old George's horse farm. Most of them were pickup trucks, and there were also some motorcycles and cars, but they were obviously not of high grade. As soon as Jianghu's car came, it attracted a lot of people's attention. Especially those young people who were making a bonfire in the small courtyard of the horse farm at this time. This is Jianghu's car. Why is he here? Jianghu's car was still very famous in the town. At that time, many young people recognized that it was Jianghu's car. Especially the owner of the horse farm, Old George's daughter, Delia, ran out directly. "Hi, Jianghu, why are you here?" When she ran out, she just saw Jianghu getting out of the car, so she asked excitedly. Am I not welcome?" Hearing Delia's words, Jianghu smiled and went forward to hug her, then said jokingly. Hearing Jianghu's words, Delia couldn't help but punch Jianghu coquettishly. "This guy is really something. I called your dad last night and said that there was a charity here, so I came to take a look." After just a light hug, Jianghu let go of his hand and then said to Delia with a smile. Hearing that Jianghu and her father had already talked on the phone, Delia couldn't help but blame her father. He didn't even tell her that Jianghu was coming, really. Cough, Delia, this is. Just as Jianghu and Delia were talking here, a white young man came over and looked at Jianghu and asked with some doubts. Hearing his words, Jianghu also looked up at him. Jianghu was not familiar with this white young man, and he didn't know him. It was very likely that he was from outside the town, and from the way he looked at him, he should have a special relationship with Delia. "Let me introduce you. This is Jianghu. The Soaring Dragon Manor in the west is his. It's a big guy. This is Baveda Jindaro, my boyfriend." Seeing the two meet, Delia introduced with a smile. "Hello." Hearing Delia's words, Jianghu also stretched out his hand and shook the man's hand. However, Jianghu could see that when this person heard that he was just a farmer, there was some pride in his eyes. In fact, this was also a kind of human inferiority. Whether it was in the country or abroad, it was inevitable for people in the city to look down on people in the countryside. Even if the people in the countryside were rich, in the eyes of some people in the city, they would feel that they were superior. At this time, Jianghu was an out-and-out countryman in the eyes of this man. As for the Soaring Dragon Manor and the big guy that Delia mentioned, he directly ignored it. No one knew where his confidence came from. "Nice to meet you, Delia. I'm going to greet Ben and the others." After shaking hands with Jianghu, this Baveda Jindaro, who was still a little nervous, relaxed. After smiling, he said something to Delia, then walked into the open space at the horse farm and gathered with some young people who were obviously dressed differently from the people in town. Baveda works in Boston as a securities trader, commonly known as a trader. Seeing that her boyfriend didn't seem to give Jianghu any face, this made Delia a little embarrassed and said to Jianghu, "Oh, no wonder." Hearing Delia's explanation, Jianghu also chuckled. A trader and a bank employee. It could be said that these were the two most arrogant professions in the world. It was not because of how much money they made, but because they had seen too much money. Because they had seen too much money, they had no concept of money. Even if the money they saw was not theirs, they would have the illusion that they were superior to others. In China, whether it exists or not, has become a commentary of this profession. Jianghu was very familiar with this in the past. "Come in, my dad and the others are in the room, but I don't think you will like to chat with those old men." Delia saw that Jianghu didn't take this matter to heart, so she brought Jianghu into her home. But just as they walked in, a group of girls ran over and pulled away the reluctant Delia. Jianghu didn't care about this. He just walked in and looked at the layout of this small courtyard. There were a total of 2 venues in the house at this time. The young people were playing on the lawn outside, except for the bonfire in the middle. There were many long tables around the bonfire. There were a lot of food, fruit plates, roasted chicken wings, barbecued meat, beef, salads, and so on. Of course, there was no lack of alcohol. Large barrels of beer and other drinks were also placed on the table. Americans liked to drink cola, whether it was Pepsi or Coca-Cola, they liked to drink it very much. On the contrary, other drinks like Sprite didn't sell particularly well in the United States. At this time, there were also many such drinks on the long table. Because he drove here today, Jianghu didn't pick up the cold beer in the barrel that looked very good. Instead, he took a bottle of cola and drank it. While drinking, he observed the surroundings. Just like what Cersei had said, this party wasn't too noisy. Of course, it could also be because it hadn't officially started yet. Most of the people gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and chatted softly. But after Jianghu walked around, he was a little depressed to find that he didn't seem to know anyone here. Speaking of which, Jianghu didn't know many people in the town, and the people he knew were basically some old men. The only young people he was familiar with were Delia and Karma Cliff. But the problem was that Karma went to college and she wouldn't come back at this time, so Jianghu was a little lonely. After walking around here, Jianghu felt that he should go in and see old George and the others. He was familiar with these people. So after drinking the bottle of cola, he walked into the room of the horse ranch. As soon as he walked in, he saw a lot of middle-aged men and women. At this time, they were gathered here and talking. Among them, Jianghu was most familiar with old George, Bob George, and Hodge Cersei, who he had just met yesterday. When the two saw Jianghu come in, their faces showed surprise. As for the other people in the room, they were also shocked when they saw Jianghu come in, because they didn't know that Jianghu would come. Chapter 621. Hi, Jiang, you're finally here. Seeing Jianghu coming over, old George and Cersei both stood up immediately and took the initiative to greet him. As for the others, they also stood up immediately, even some gray-haired old people. From this, it could be seen that Jianghu's reputation in the town had reached a certain level. Take a seat, don't be so polite. Seeing that everyone stood up to greet him, Jianghu also smiled, then greeted old George and Cersei, and immediately asked everyone to sit down. Old George's wife had already prepared a chair for Jianghu and let him join these people, which made Jianghu feel a little flattered. Jiang, let me introduce you to everyone here. Seeing that everyone was seated, old George also smiled and said to Jianghu. After all, Jianghu was not particularly familiar with the others here except for him. Oh, Cersei is still okay. This is Hodge Cersei, I think you should also know him. This brat sold a lot of your parts to us, haha. This is Cotton Harris, also a rancher, the Straw Hat Flower Ranch to the east of you is his. Hearing old George's words, Jianghu also shook hands with Cotton Harris, who was sitting over there. Cotton Harris was a slightly old-fashioned white man in his 50s, and there was no smile on his face, but when he shook hands with Jianghu, he deliberately squeezed out a smile. Although it was not much better than crying, it was still a kind of kindness after all. Before Jianghu came, Cotton Harris was the biggest rancher here. Of course, the so-called big referred to the people in the West, such as Texas or Montana. It was a super mini ranch. His ranch was a total of 2,700 acres, and Jianghu's ranch area was 9,200 acres, much smaller than Jianghu's ranch area. However, in this place, his ranch was not small, with a total of 10,000 cows. It was indeed not small. However, the cows he raised were mainly for feed, not for grazing. He did not have that much grass to eat. This is Thackeray Eddy, also a rancher. After introducing Cotton Harris, old George introduced another rancher. This Thackeray Eddy's rancher was much smaller than Cotton Harris's rancher. His ranch was only 200 acres, and he raised very few beef cows, mostly for his own consumption. He mainly raised dairy cows, with a total of 500 dairy cows, and could be considered the town's largest milk supplier. This is Kerry Clark, also a rancher, but his ranch is further away from yours. Then Old George introduced another white man, Kerry Clark. Rather than a rancher, he was more of a manor owner, because his ranch was not too big, only 150 acres. He did not raise too many cows, but he raised a lot of sheep, and also planted a lot of vegetables. In the United States, vegetables were more expensive than meat, which was not rare, so it was normal to grow vegetables and sell them. After introducing the 3 white ranchers, Old George introduced 3 more people, 2 black men, and 1 white man. One of the 2 black men was J. Matthew, who also owned a horse ranch. He could be considered as Old George's apprentice, and used to work in Old George's ranch. Later on, he became independent, but he often came back to buy horses. He mainly sold horses outside of Winthrop. After all, this was Old George's territory. There was also Jermaine Lohnard, who was a used car dealer. He was a very fat black man, and always had a smile on his face. He knew that with Jianghai's wealth, it was impossible for him to buy a used car, but since Jianghai no longer needed his car, he could sell it to him, so Jianghai could be considered a potential customer. The last white man was Base Bono, who was the owner of the small town's dairy factory. He mainly received milk from dairy farmers like Sac Eddy, then processed it and sold it to the small town, or to other places like Boston. Before Jianghai bought cows in his manor, he also bought his own milk, and the quality was quite good. Of course, compared to Jianghai's milk now, it was a bit worse. After all, cows didn't just eat grass. After the introductions, everyone sat down again, and Old George began to talk about the topic that he didn't finish before. Jianghai listened for a while, and to be honest, after listening for 5 minutes, he couldn't bear it anymore, because most of what Old George and the others talked about was related to their politics, but it had nothing to do with Jianghai. For example, how many cents the price of ordinary beef had dropped, how much more expensive pasture was to buy, how much more expensive seeds were to buy, how much more expensive those Wall Street vampires should go to hell, and so on. There were also some American politics and so on. For example, it was getting harder and harder to get a ranch loan. In the past, they could apply for $50,000, $100,000, but now, even $10,000 was a problem. They were now thinking about whether they should go to Boston's town hall to protest and put pressure on the government. To be honest, these things had nothing to do with Jianghai. First, he didn't buy pasture, and the pasture in his manor wouldn't run out no matter how much he ate. Second, he didn't care about the price of beef, because his beef was so popular, who would dare to lower the price? Third, he didn't need the subsidies and support from the government. His subsidies were just some tax breaks. Apply for a loan? Does Jianghai need it? So, although these things were closely related to everyone here, they had nothing to do with Jianghai. So after listening for half an hour, Jianghai resisted the urge to sleep and left with the excuse that he needed to go to the washroom. Out of the horse ranch house, Jianghai couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. After getting another bottle of Coke, he found a corner and sat there with a chair. He looked at the busy people in front of him and drank the Coke in his hand. "Hey, handsome, can I get to know you?" But at this moment, a girl suddenly came over with a bottle of beer and looked at Jianghai with a smile. Hearing her words, Jianghai also glanced at her. This girl should be a college student, about 20 years old. She was white, with reddish-brown hair, and her figure was quite plump. After all, she was still a college student. Her control of her figure was not so good, but she revealed a youthful aura. At this time, she was looking at Jianghai curiously with a pair of big eyes, and Jianghai looked at her brown eyes and smiled. Of course, Jianghai. Standing up, Jianghai stretched out his hand to the girl, and the girl deliberately shook Jianghai's hand. "My name is Kelly, Kelly Solon, I know you, the owner of Soaring Dragon Manor." Hearing Jianghai's words, the girl smiled and shook hands with Jianghai, then took a chair from the side and put it next to Jianghai, and said with a smile, "Wow, it seems that I'm quite famous." After taking a sip of Coke, Jianghu said with a smile. Of course, you are the man who controls the lifeline of Winthrop, haha. Hearing Jianghu's words, the girl named Kelly also laughed. It seems that Jianghu's speech that night was quite successful. Are you also from Winthrop? Shaking his head, Jianghu actually didn't want to make things too awkward with the townspeople, but sometimes, if you don't give these people a good beating, they won't know the pain themselves. With a smile, Jianghu wisely changed the topic and looked at Kelly. He really wasn't familiar with Winthrop people. Of course, our family should have lived in Winthrop for decades. After all, since my grandfather's generation, we have lived here until my death, Kelly said to Jianghu with a smile after hearing Jianghu's words. Wow, that's really a long time. Looking at your young age, you should still be in university, right? Hearing Kelly's words, Jianghu couldn't help but exclaim, then asked her. Yeah, I'm in the Department of Marine Engineering at Boston University, but I'm already in my senior year this year. I'm preparing for my graduation thesis, and my credits have already been fixed. Writing a thesis is not difficult, but finding a job is not easy. Kelly shrugged helplessly and said softly. Hearing this, Jianghu also wisely didn't continue. He just touched his nose and smiled. Is he going to say something? Is he going to help her find a job? Don't be ridiculous, Jianghu doesn't want anything to happen with her. Of course, if it's for free, he would be quite happy. I heard that you didn't come to these gatherings before. Why are you here today? Seeing that Jianghu didn't continue with her words, Kelly didn't care. She chuckled and changed the topic. Mayor Wallace said that I should communicate more with the townspeople and integrate into this group as soon as possible. With a shrug, Jianghu said helplessly. Although this is a good thing, in the current situation, it doesn't seem to be easy. Looking at Jianghu, Kelly thought for a moment and said seriously to Jianghu, Americans like to attend parties. This is a good idea, but in addition to attending parties, you should also get along with these people. Get along with them? Hearing her words, Jianghu was a little confused. How do I get along with them? He doesn't even know anyone. In this world, the easiest places to form friendships are in the military camp and school. Of course, it's impossible for you to be a soldier or a student, but the battlefield in peacetime is in the arena. Do you know any sports? Looking at Jianghu's puzzled look, Kelly also smiled and said to Jianghu. Hearing Kelly's words, Jianghu couldn't help but let out an "oh." I know how to play basketball. Thinking about it, he was quite good at basketball in the past. He could abuse professional players. Basketball? That might work, but I'm not too sure. As far as I know, the best sports to make friends are baseball and football. He rubbed his hair lightly. It seems that basketball in the United States really belongs to stepmothers. It's not popular. But as for baseball and football, Jianghu doesn't know how to play. This is also a problem. Chapter 622. In fact, if you want to integrate into the town, the most important thing is to have no gap with them. Don't let them always think that you are the one who controls the town's economy. You are different from them. When they no longer care about your skin color and your property, you are officially integrated with the town's residents. Ignoring Jianghu's puzzled gaze, Kelly, Soren smiled and spoke. Hearing what she said, Jianghu couldn't help but nod. He knew that the girl was right, but now that Jianghu wants to integrate here, he needs to consider a lot of things. After all, he has a net worth of billions. Although most of it is not known, he still needs to think about it. But I don't know how to play football or baseball. My understanding of these two sports is limited to the cartoons I've seen before. Shrugging, Jianghu said helplessly. Indeed, he didn't know much about these two sports. In fact, football and baseball are very easy. There are football and baseball teams in our town. I am very familiar with their people. If you are interested in joining, I can recommend you to try. Looking at Jianghu, Kelly said with a smile. But listening to her words, Jianghu couldn't help but smile. It's better not to integrate sports into the story of the city. Even if it's football and baseball, Jianghu doesn't want anyone to say that he doesn't do his job. Well, it's a bit of a sloppy job. Hey, Kelly, I was looking for you. You are here. Just as Jianghu and Kelly were chatting happily, a young man in his early 20s also came over. After looking at Jianghu with some vigilance, he said to Kelly, Soren. Hey, Jack, what can I do for you? But obviously, Kelly Sauron was not like a little girl who would take the initiative to leave. It was not easy for her to make friends with Jianghu. She would not leave so easily. Hearing Kelly Sauron's words, the young man named Jack was speechless. It could be seen that this young man named Jack was interested in Kelly, but Kelly wasn't interested in him now. Well, I was going to ask you if you wanted a drink, but it seems like there's no need for that now. Jack shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly. He took one last look at Jianghu and walked back to the campfire. The man named Baveda Jindirat spoke, and his eyes drifted to Jianghu's side from time to time. Baveda is actually a good guy. He's witty, humorous, and earns a lot of money. His family background is also not bad. No wonder Delia was able to establish a relationship with him so quickly and even brought him home. Looking at Jack and Baveda in the distance, Kelly said this sentence unconsciously, but Jianghu couldn't help but laugh when he heard it. In fact, he understood the meaning of the girl's words. If he didn't appear today, Kelly would probably be Jack's female companion. But to be honest, Jianghu was not interested in these girls. It didn't matter if it was just for fun, but if he got involved, it was not necessary because they were unlikely to tolerate Jianghu's nonsense. Jianghu's business was not small now. Naturally, he also needed a woman who could take care of the overall situation. Well, the party is about to start. Let's go. By the way, do you have an auction item? Looking at Kelly Sauron in front of him, Jianghu looked at her curiously and asked. Kelly also chuckled when she heard Jianghu's words. I auctioned some flower seeds. Seeing that Jianghu didn't care about what she said, Jianghu didn't know what Kelly was thinking, but her face didn't change. She just continued to speak with a smile. Don't donate the money later. Okay, let's go. Glancing at Kelly, Jianghu walked over with a smile. As they walked over, the party officially began. The parent-level existences in the room also came out and had a good meal around the campfire. Then, it was time for the auction. Today's auctioneer was Delia, and the first item to be auctioned was her item. This item was a very delicate silver snuff bottle. In fact, it was given to her by a tourist from Wuxia. After all, Delia was quite good-looking. In the face of such a foreign woman, not everyone was as calm as still water, so some tourists would come to flirt with her. Of course, they didn't do anything excessive, but it didn't matter if they received some gifts in exchange for some gifts. After all, it was a pure silver snuff bottle, so the bidding price wasn't low at the beginning. $20 or $30 were constantly being bid. 50. Jianghu looked at it. He also had some interest in this little thing. After all, it was also something from his country, and Jianghu could also benefit from it. But just as he finished bidding $50, Delia's boyfriend, Baveda Jindarou, bid $100. As soon as he saw him bid, Jianghu directly gave it to him. But when he learned that Jianghu had gotten the snuff bottle, this guy clearly looked at him with disdain, which made Jianghu a little unhappy. Does this guy think I'm easy to bully? Baveda is a good guy, but he's still too young. He just graduated from college not long ago. His family got someone to help him get into the securities center to be a trader. It's okay to have a friend, but he's still a long way off. Perhaps sensing Jianghu's dissatisfaction, old George, who was sitting next to him, couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, Jianghu also laughed. He understood what old George meant. He wanted Jianghu not to be angry with this guy. He wouldn't be angry with Jianghu, but it was inevitable that he would be unhappy. But he wouldn't directly fight back. Jiang Hai wasn't interested in the next few items. There was a blanket, a handmade saddle, an oil painting, and so on. Jiang Hai wasn't very interested in these things, so he just sat there and looked. We all know that Kelly's family is the largest flower plantation in the town. All the flowers in the town are planted by her family. These 100 seeds contain all kinds of flowers, and I can guarantee that every single one of them can be planted. To be honest, even I want some of them. Alright, the auction with no reserve price starts now. Just as Jiang Hai was sitting there and looking, the flower seeds that Kelly had mentioned to him were finally brought up. Although it was only a small packet, it could be seen that after Delia mentioned it, many women showed a look of yearning. There were very few women who didn't like flowers and sparkling things. However, compared to sparkling things, flowers were easier to come into contact with. Many women looked at their male companions on the spot. Their intentions were self-evident. $50. However, before anyone spoke, the first one to speak was Jack. It could be seen that he was deeply in love with Kelly, so it was natural for him to be the first one to call her. After calling her name, he looked at Kelly excitedly. As for the others, after hearing that the starting price was $50, most of them fell silent. 100 seeds were sold for $50, which meant that each seed was sold for 50 cents. That was a bit unacceptable for everyone. After all, it was already a bit of a loss to sell a flower for 50 cents, let alone a seed that might not even survive. $100. But unfortunately, in order to repay Kelly for her words, Jiang Hai didn't care about money, even though it was unlikely that anything would happen between Jiang Hai and her. He directly took out $100. $200. Jack, who originally thought that he had it in the bag, couldn't help but be stunned when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Then, he glared at Jiang Hai and called out a number. $500. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai didn't care at all. With his net worth, a few $100? If it fell into the sea while he was out at sea, he might not even go into the sea to get it. He indeed didn't care about this little bit of money, but that didn't mean that others didn't care. Many people sucked in a cold breath when they heard Jiang Hai raise the price to $500. One had to know that the purchase rate of dollars in the United States was still very high. $500 could last a month. Although it was a bit tight, it was at least enough for food, drinks, rent, utilities, internet, and so on. When Jiang Hai called out $500, Jack's expression turned ugly. Many people looked at Kelly with the same expression in their eyes. You're in luck. In their eyes, Jiang Hai spent a lot of money to buy Kelly's things because Jiang Hai wanted to pursue her. But only Kelly knew that Jiang Hai was only paying for it. Seeing Kelly's look, Jack pulled Baveda over and whispered to him. After that, Jack called out a number. $650. I really like these seeds. Please give me some face and let me have them. $650 was already the sum of all the cash he and Baveda had on them. But they knew that Jiang Hai was rich. If Jiang Hai didn't let them have the money now, they wouldn't have any more money to buy. Unfortunately, when he said that, the Winthrop townsfolk were amused. Now, everyone in Winthrop knew that Jiang Hai was famous for being amenable to persuasion but not coercion. If you asked him in private, he might stop, but if you threatened him so openly, it would be strange if he didn't. Sure enough, as soon as Jack finished speaking, Jiang Hai raised his hand again. He glanced at the group and couldn't help but chuckle. $1,000. Wow! As soon as Jiang Hai finished speaking, everyone present exclaimed. $1,000. A small auction like this might not even sell for $1,000 in the end. But Jiang Hai casually called out this price just to buy 100 flower seeds. It had to be said that ordinary people really didn't understand the world of the rich. As for Jack, when he heard Jiang Hai's words, he was already angry. He wanted to rush over but was stopped by Baveda. Chapter 623. Calm down, Jack, we're in Winthrop. Looking at Jianghu and the others in the distance, Baveta Jindirat whispered in Jack's ear. Hearing Baveta's words, Jack had to calm down. Jianghu was throwing money at the girl he liked in front of him. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't be able to bear it, okay? $1,500. Looking at Jack's eyes that were about to burst into flames, Jianghu smiled disdainfully. He actually raised the price by $500 when he offered $1,000. Hearing what Jianghu said, everyone looked at Jack with a hint of ridicule on their faces. Although they weren't familiar with Jianghu, they knew that Jianghu really didn't lack money. You bastard. Jack couldn't help but roar when he heard Jianghu raise the price by $500 like a slap in the face. $2,000. Hearing Jack's roar, Jianghu stood up again and said smugly. He didn't know if it was the feeling of being a bad guy hidden in his genes that made him burn up again. He now really liked the feeling of slapping others in the face in front of them. He was a bad guy, come and hate him. Who the F***CK, idiot. Seeing Jianghu raise the price to $2,000, the man's face became even uglier. After cursing a few times, he turned and left. He knew that he wouldn't have a good ending if he had a conflict with Jianghu here. Instead of humiliating himself here, it was better to just leave. Therefore, he didn't care about Baveta's pull and directly left George's horse farm. He rode his motorcycle outside and left. Watching him leave, Jianghu helplessly shrugged. Okay, the final price is $2,000. These seeds belong to our Winthrop's richest man, Mr. Jianghu. Seeing that her only competitor had left, although she knew that he couldn't afford the price, Delia still waited for him to leave before announcing the birth of today's bidding king. After Delia gave the flower seed to Jianghu, Jianghu nodded and said, "Let's go." Jianghu also directly took out $2,000 in cash and handed it to Kelly Saran next to him. When Kelly took the money, she deliberately scratched Jianghu's palm. Her meaning was obvious, but Jianghu didn't want anything to happen with her. So, he just smiled, gave her the money, and returned to his seat. Looking at Jianghu's performance, Kelly curled her lips a little helplessly. If it was an ordinary American, he would have left with her or taken her away. Jianghu didn't bring a female companion, but he was still so careful. Back in his seat, Jianghu leaned back and looked at the items that continued to be auctioned. Hey, Jianghu, your move is really good. Not only did you defeat your rival, but it seems that you also made Kelly completely fall in love with you. Serge walked over and sat next to Jianghu and whispered to him. Even though Cersei was a father, he was still quite young. He was only at the level of a university student. It's just that he didn't go to college. Instead, he used the money and time from college to open a parts factory. Are you familiar with this Kelly? Hearing his words, Jianghu asked him strangely. Of course, Kelly is a famous flower in our town. Her family also grows flowers. The largest flower shop in our town is opened by her family. Her family is also your tenant. After all, it's on the business street. Hearing Jianghu's words, Serge also said to Jianghu. Black people's personalities are two extremes. If he doesn't know you well, he doesn't like to talk to you, especially when he doesn't like you. But if he knows you well, then he is a chatterbox, and the speed of talking is not much slower than the speed of rapping. As soon as he heard Jianghu ask about Kelly, he started to talk non-stop. Jianghu also had a general understanding. Kelly was quite famous in the town. She was quite beautiful, and her studies were good since she was a child. She was not a troublemaker. In high school, she didn't mess around with men and women. In college, she had a boyfriend, but the guy was 1 year older than her. They broke up after graduation. Now, she was still in a relationship. And this Jack is Baveta's friend. Kelly is Delia's friend. They met through this pair. After that, Jack started to pursue Kelly. However, judging from the current situation, the effect wasn't very good. By the way, I heard that you often play football games? Listening to Serge's machine gun-like words, Jiang Hai immediately shouted stop and began to change the topic. Of course, I am a member of our Winthrop football team. Although we Winthrop people don't have much money, our team is definitely in the top 3 in this area. Serge said with a smile when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Americans really like to play baseball and football. There are 4 major leagues in North America: ice hockey, baseball, basketball, and football. However, ice hockey was more or less a limited sport. There was no ice in the South. If they wanted ice, they had to build their own ice rink in the stadium. If they played in this way, they would definitely have to spend money. After all, not everyone was willing to spend this money. Therefore, the expansion of ice hockey among the people is not very good. Basketball was originally a pure black sport. Although white people participate in it, they are still much less well known. And in the United States, after all, white people still have the final say. Basketball's position in the United States is more awkward. In the beginning, it was only better than ice hockey. Later, it might not even be able to maintain its position in the United States. Fortunately, David Stern decided to globalize and make the NBA of the world. Speaking of football, there were 5 major leagues in Europe, which divided the viewing audience. Some like to watch the English Premier League, some like to watch Serie A, some like to watch La Liga, and so on. But when it came to basketball, there was only one international league in the world, the NBA. All the top players had to join this league, which was the highest level of competition. Because of this, although basketball is very famous in the United States now, there are not many people who really like it. Baseball is a sport for white people in the United States. There is no physical collision. Before the rise of football, baseball has always been the biggest league in the United States. When it began to decline. Perhaps it was after the United States began to strictly investigate racial discrimination. Speaking of football, it is worthy of being the biggest sport in North America. This sport is very barbaric and makes people excited. Most importantly, black people and white people can have their own exclusive positions on the field. For example, black people, defensive linemen, running backs, and receivers were all positions that they could play. On the other hand, white people had a much higher chance of producing a top-notch quarterback. In addition, this sport was really a clash of muscles, so there were many people watching it. The community sports culture in the United States is very developed. Almost every community, every small town has its own many kinds of teams, such as basketball, baseball, football, and so on. Then, the nearby cities or states will hold some competitions from time to time every year. There are also prizes. Not only can the teams show their faces, but they can also get some monetary rewards. So in the United States, sports for all people is not just a saying. When it comes to football, Serge is obviously more interested than Kelly. This is because he knows that Kelly will not like him, but he likes football very much. But to be honest, Jiang Hai does not know much about football. The only thing he has seen about football is a cartoon, Lightspeed Masked Man 21. This is a normal cartoon from Japan. It is very exciting to watch, but because of the audience, this cartoon that Jiang Hai thought was good did not become popular in China. The main character, Kobayakawa Ryona, can reach a speed of 4.2 seconds for 40 meters, 0.91 meters per yard. Later, it evolved to 4.1 seconds, which is faster than the speed of light on the field. But for Jiang Hai, is 4.1 seconds for 40 meters fast? If he runs with all his strength, he should be able to run 100 meters in less than 5 seconds. After all, the human body limit of 4 times is not a joke. However, Jiang Hai is just listening. The last time he played basketball, he almost collapsed. This time, it is better for him to be careful. After listening to Serge for a long time, Jiang Hai also listened for a long time, but he did not intend to try it. But he does not want to try it, but Serge wants him to see it. He can see that Jiang Hai does not know much about football, but in his opinion, as a man, how can he not like football? This should not be the case. It just so happens that we have a friendly game the day after tomorrow against Chelsea, a city near Boston, not a football team, in Boston's XX Stadium. You can come and see it then." Seeing that Jianghu seems to be moved by his words, Serge could not help but say excitedly. Hearing what he said, Jianghu also nodded. "It does not matter if I go and see it. He has nothing to do anyway." After the time was agreed, the auction here was also over. In the end, a total of $4,270 were sold tonight. Of course, 2,000 of them were Jianghu's. The owner of this money can choose to donate the money or choose to take it away. Basically, anything worth $100 or $80 was donated, and anything worth a few $100s was taken away, especially Kelly's money. If she donated it, naturally, everyone would be very happy, but if she took it away, no one would say anything. After all, it was $2,000. In the end, she hugged Jianghu and wanted Jianghu to send her back. After failing, Kelly sullen pouted and left. Jianghu also drove back to his manor. Today was a good start. After returning, Jianghu told Bernice and the others that he was going to watch the football game the day after tomorrow, but they despised him because in their view, the football game was actually a very barbaric game. At least, they did not like it. Chapter 624. Run this way and go around to catch the ball. When the catcher catches the ball, pay attention to the flanks and protect both sides. Looking at the people warming up on the field, Jianghu slowly walked to the stands next to him with a hint of expectation on his face. Jianghu really had nothing to do recently, so after tying the grass this morning, he went home to change his clothes, took a shower, and drove to Boston Stadium because he remembered Cersei said that they had a game against Chelsea today. Sure enough, as soon as he entered, he saw the people warming up. At this time, the catchers were warming up. Rugby balls were bounced out, and a black Winthrop catcher was constantly jumping in the air and collecting the football in the air into his arms. He had to admit that Winthrop's rugby team had a lot of people, and many of them were people that Jianghu knew. Of course, he was only familiar with them. In addition to Cersei, he also recognized the person who sold him the sea map at the Poseidon Festival. He was the defensive lineman, and Cersei was the offensive lineman. In addition, there were some people that he was familiar with, but he did not know what they were for. Winthrop was not small, but there were not many people. It was a town with a total of only a little more than 1,000 people. Although Jianghu wasn't the same as when he first came here, when he saw a white person as a white person and a black person as a black person, and if he didn't look carefully, he couldn't tell who was who. But now, he still looked a little blurry. After glancing at Cersei and the others, Jianghu looked to the side and saw a group of girls dancing on the sidelines. What surprised Jianghu was that among these girls, Jianghu actually knew two of them. One was Delia, and the other was Kelly Solon. At this time, these two girls were leading a dozen girls of different ages to dance there. The weather was indeed not warm, and it was even a little cold. Wisps of white steam were coming out of the heads of these girls. It was obvious that they had been practicing for a long time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, Winthrop will win, Winthrop will win, Winthrop is the best. Listening to the girls' slogans, Jianghu slowly walked over. He had to admit that the Winthrop girls were quite good-looking, probably because they lived by the sea. The Winthrop girls had good figures, tight and elastic. Especially today, they were still wearing summer cheerleading uniforms. The top was a shirt that exposed the waist, and the bottom was a skirt. Although they were wearing safety pants and knee-length white stockings, it still looked very cold. It was only about a few degrees outside. Jianghu? Ladies, that's enough. Let's conserve our energy. We still have to cheer for our warriors later. Seeing Jianghu walk over, Kelly and Delia clapped their hands, signaling the girls who were still dancing to take a break. Hearing their words, the girls who were still dancing stopped. Then, without caring about the sweat on their bodies, they directly put on the jackets next to them, because they knew that they were not wearing much at this time. If they waited for a while before putting on their jackets, they would catch a cold. They did not want to be cheerleaders for a small town's team and end up affecting their normal lives. That would not be worth it, especially in the United States, where a cold was not a minor illness. That was because the United States did not sell the cold medicine from China. Cold medicine actually had side effects. While killing germs, it would also kill white blood cells. In the past, the cold medicine from China contained an ingredient called cough. Alright, I can't say it, but this ingredient, after being refined, could be made into a unique product. Therefore, generally speaking, the cold medicine from China was not allowed to enter the market. And foreign countries did not produce their own cold medicine, so if you caught a cold, the hospital would only give you a bunch of vitamins and let you go home to take them. Then, force yourself to endure and use your own immune system to cure the cold. If it was really too serious, and you had a high fever that made you unconscious, then you would be directly taken to the hospital to be hospitalized for an 4 drip. Therefore, in the United States, a cold was really not a comfortable illness, so most people paid attention to this point. Jiang, why are you here? After putting on their jackets again, Delia and Kelly ran over with a smile. I heard from Cersei that there is a game today. I have nothing to do, so I came to take a look. Looking at the 2 girls in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. He naturally knew that these 2 girls did not have good intentions towards him. They were quite interested in him, no, it should be said that they were interested in his money. But they were all from the same town, so Jiang Hai did not want to have a falling out with the residents of the town. If that happened, it would be very awkward. He wanted to have some relations with Aphrodite and the others, even though Jiang Hai had been arguing that rabbits did not eat the grass near their burrows. But if Jiang Hai was a little tougher, then it would at most be a little awkward when Aphrodite and his women met in the future. That was all. But if old George or Kelly Solon's father blocked the door with a gun, then it would be awkward, so even if he knew that as long as he waved his hand, the 2 girls would follow him, he still did not dare to do so. Yeah, we'll definitely teach those Chelsea people a lesson today. Come on, come and sit here. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, which were obviously distant, Delia could not help but curl her lips, but Kelly still said with a smile. Then the 2 girls took Jiang Hai to the front of the stands at the back. At this time, there were already a lot of people sitting in the stands. Some of these people were the players' families, some were the townspeople who had nothing to do, and some were passers-by. In the United States, football was indeed a national sport. Many people liked it. When they saw a game, it was inevitable for them to come in and take a look. Among these people, Jiang Hai found a group of familiar kids. They were the children who had asked him for candy on Halloween. But unfortunately, these children were going crazy there at this time, and no one would pay attention to Jiang Hai. In the world of children, although money was important, it was not the most important thing. They knew that Jiang Hai was rich, but they did not care about the money, so they did not care about what was going on with Jiang Hai. Jiang, do you know about football? Sitting in the first row of the stands, Delia and Kelly did not care. They sat on the left and right of Jiang Hai. After all, they had just finished exercising. The 2 girls' bodies were exuding heat. When a woman smelled a man's sweat, she would feel that this person was very manly, and when a man smelled a woman's sweat, he would feel strange. Just as Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed, Delia asked Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai nodded. I know a little about it. The field is divided into the offensive team and the defensive team, but that is professional. It is also divided into linebackers, receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, and so on. If you carry the ball to the area in front of the big fork, you will get 5 points and you can add a penalty kick. If you also touch the field, you will get 2 more points. If you kick the ball into the goal, you will get 1 point. If you choose to kick the ball under normal circumstances, you will get 3 points and there is no chance to add offense. Hearing Delia's question, Jiang Hai touched his nose and said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia could not help but be a little surprised. I thought you didn't know anything. On the other side, Kelly smiled and put her hand on Jianghai's arm and said with a smile. Seeing Kelly's action, Delia also took the initiative to move closer to Jianghai. Feeling the two girls getting closer and closer, Jianghai did not know what to do for a moment. Although Jianghai usually meant what he said, when it came to the matters between men and women, Jianghai was still very passive. It was clear from the number of times he was disobeyed. Our team is a team that combines running and passing. Cersei's speed and skills are very good. The catchers, Tom and Carrie, are very good. Their running positions are quite sharp. In Boston, the only teams that can compete with us are Boston, Chelsea, and Cambridge. But recently, Cambridge's main force moved to California, and they can't do it anymore. Currently, they are in Massachusetts. It's us, Chelsea, and Boston, the three powerhouses. Delia and Kelly did not care whether Jianghai was embarrassed or not. They wanted to sit directly in Jianghai's arms at this time. There was nothing wrong with sticking to Jianghai. While sticking to Jianghai, they also talked to Jianghai about the strength of Winthrop and the enemies of Winthrop. At this time, on the other side of the field, a group of people in blue and white came out of the tunnel. If nothing unexpected happened, those people should be the opponent of the Winthrop team today, Chelsea. Chelsea's security guards, go back to your hometown. As soon as they saw Chelsea come out, the stands on the other side of the field were naturally filled with thunderous cheers. But on the Winthrop side, the boos were deafening. Even Delia stood up and shouted at the team over there. Hearing her words, Jianghai was a little confused. This Chelsea team is famous for playing dirty on our side. Their boss and their quarterback are called Kristen Adis. He has a big casino in Chelsea. These players are the security guards he hired. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are notorious. Kelly also said to Jianghai when she saw the confusion in Jianghai's eyes. Well, they really don't look like good-for-nothings. He glanced at the people over there. Although they were far away, Jianghai's eyes were good. With a glance at the people over there, he knew that these people were not good-for-nothings. Although there was no murderous aura on them, which meant that they had no lives on their hands, their fierce aura was quite strong. If an average person encountered these guys, they would probably be shocked by their fierce aura. Of course, this was also a characteristic of being a security guard. No, it was not right to call them security guards because they should be thugs to be exact. Chapter 625. We'll be counting on you later. Winthrop's captain patted Cersei's shoulder as he looked at the Chelsea team. Cersei was in the spare parts business all year round, so he could not afford to hire anyone. Therefore, he did all the loading and unloading of the car himself. Coupled with his black physique, he ran extremely fast and his body was abnormally strong. He could be said to be one of the best running backs in the Massachusetts Town League. There were not many non-professional players in Massachusetts who were better than him. The only one who could compete with him was the Boston team's running back. Cersei laughed when he heard the captain's words. After the two teams appeared on the stage, the game was about to start. Kelly and Delia, although they still wanted to stay by Jianghai's side, now that the game had started, they had no choice but to leave. After all, they were still cheerleaders. There will be a barbecue after the game. Let's go together. Kelly and Delia said to Jianghai before they left. For a game like theirs, regardless of whether they won or lost, there would be a party. If they lost, they would relax. If they won, they would naturally celebrate. Today's party was prepared early in the morning. It was a barbecue party in Cersei's factory. Holding a barbecue party with the smell of engine oil was really quite creative. Okay. Jianghai did not have anything to do today, so he smiled and said, okay. He would not be able to blend into the town and play with the old people. Rather than that, he would rather mix with the young people. Based on the current situation, the young people of Winthrop were quite kind to him. Delia and Kelly laughed when they heard Jianghai agree. Then, they looked at each other. In a position where Jianghai could not see, there were sparks in their eyes from time to time. Regardless of what the two women thought, the match officially began after the two teams finished their warm-up. After the coin toss, the first team to attack was Chelsea. On the other side, Winthrop's team kicked the ball directly to the midfield with a big kick. The Chelsea team's receiver instantly caught the football and ran over. However, before he could run 20 yards, he was pushed to the ground by the Winthrop team's linebacker who rushed over. Bang! Both of their bodies fell on the lawn. Jianghu felt the pain in his body when he heard it. Although these people were wearing helmets and protective gear, after all, this was not a professional competition, so the protective gear was not too tight, and the defense was very ordinary. It was somewhat like the protective gear worn by children when they first learned to roller skate, but with the addition of a battle suit like the one worn by the Scions in Dragon Ball when Vegeta and others first came to Earth. It was used to protect the torso. But even so, Jianghu looked at the two people who fell and felt pain for them. However, it was nothing to them. Although they pushed the man down, the receiver firmly controlled the ball in his arms. They were going to attack from here, and the ball was also theirs. At the referee's signal, the two teams began to line up. A group of the strongest Americans lined up at the front. These people were the team's wall. They were the linebackers. Behind the linebackers was the quarterback. On the left and right stood the receivers and running forwards. With the referee's whistle, the Chelsea quarterback also began to shout, "Heart, heart, heart, heart." The Chelsea players did not move at first, but when Hart shouted for the third time, the linebacker in the middle instantly threw the football in front of him over his crotch and into the hands of the quarterback. The game began at that moment. On the other side, Winthrop's players also pounced on the opponent at the first moment. The defensive lineman blocked the defensive lineman, and the two interceptors instantly bypassed the human wall and headed towards the opponent's 4-point line. However, the opponent's quarterback had already passed the ball to their running backs. Their forward used one hand to protect the ball while his other hand instantly pressed down on the helmet of a tackler who was rushing over. The tackler fell to the ground. Then, he jumped over the tackler and sprinted in the direction of the goal. Hiss, oh! Looking at the man who fell there and was about to overturn the soil, Jianghu also grinned. But although it felt a little cruel, Jianghu's eyes could not leave the field in front of him. He now understood why no country other than the United States and Australia had introduced this sport. It was really too cruel. Jianghu had only heard of rugby before, but he had not played it in China. He had not even watched a game. He only heard that there was a type of rugby in China that was learned from Europe. It was called the waist flag rugby. Pulling the flag at the waist was considered to have stopped the opponent. It was not as cruel as it was now. He had to admit that there was actually a tyrannical factor in the human body, especially when watching a game like this. Although Chelsea's running forward killed the interceptor, he did not run too far. After running for 5 or 6 yards, he was stopped by a big white man on Winthrop's side with a grappling move. Jianghu had some impression of this white man. He did not know his name, but he knew that he was a fisherman. He had a fishing boat at home. Jianghu had seen him when he chose the fishing boat to take tourists to play. This guy was 195 meters tall. He was fast and strong. After all, he was a fisherman. His fishing boat did not have an automatic net reel. It had to be turned by hand. Even if there were pulleys, that thing was not an ordinary kind of hard. Therefore, he trained this guy to have a strong physique. In an instant, he approached the running back and directly grabbed him. Just like a shoulder bump in wrestling, he directly knocked the guy back more than a meter. The football also fell to the ground powerlessly. The rugby ball touched the ground and the attack failed. If it did not touch the ground, both sides could continue to attack if it was snatched. But if it touched the ground, the attack failed. But Chelsea did not care because they had 4 opportunities to attack, knock him down. When the two sides rearranged the formation, Jianghu was also infected by the atmosphere at the scene. He had to admit that rugby was indeed a sport that could make people's hormones soar rapidly. In the beginning, when he watched the slam dunk master, he did not care too much. But after Kuriko's basketball came out, it was simply a fantasy instead of a sports competition. After all, it could cover the entire field with a 100% three-point field goal percentage, absolute defense within the three-point line, the ability to imitate the opponent's movements in an instant, the ability to use all postures to put the ball into the basket, the ability to dribble the ball forward and say, "You will make way for me." The opposing player would fall down by himself. If these things appeared in reality, well, there was nothing to see in the NBA. Although the speed of light masked man was not as bad as Kuriko's basketball, it was also a little exaggerated. But with just a little understanding of the cartoon, Jianghu had a smattering of knowledge about the game on the field. He had to admit that it was really interesting. It even gave him the urge to go back and watch the NFL. However, he was only going to take a look. He wasn't too willing to participate in it because the gap between them was too big. Soon, the first half of the game ended amidst the cheers of Jianghu and the others. Winthrop's side led the opponent 12-9 with Cecil's 2 touchdowns. The opponent scored a touchdown, hit an extra kick, and scored 3 points with another kick. "Hey, Jiang, you're here. Watch how we slaughter these Chelsea guys." When she came back to rest, Serge saw Jianghu sitting in the first row at a glance, so she spoke with a smile. "I'm waiting for you to win. If you win, I'll pay for the drinks later." Looking at Serge, Jianghu also gave a thumbs up and said with a serious face. When she heard that Jianghu was paying for the drinks, Serge knew that he was going to celebrate with them. She laughed loudly. When the others learned that Jianghu was paying for the drinks and that he was going to celebrate with them, they also shouted that it was a good thing. Originally, when they went to Serge's place, the drinks they drank were just beer or some low-grade wine. After all, they were not rich people. But since Jianghu said that he was paying for the drinks, it proved that the drinks later would definitely be much better than they imagined. This time, they were even more excited. "What's the commotion over there?" Looking at the Winthrop people in the distance, the Chelsea quarterback on the other side, who was also the owner of the team, could not help but ask with some doubts. "I heard that the richest man in Winthrop is here and said that he wants to treat them to a drink." Hearing the boss's words, a younger brother next to him could not help but come over and speak to him. Hearing his words, Kristen Adis could not help but raise his eyebrows. The richest man? That Wuxia Jiang. Looking into the distance, he vaguely saw the yellow-skinned guy in the crowd. Jianghu's reputation was not only in Winthrop, but also in Boston. After all, this was an out-and-out billionaire. Being on good terms with such a person was beneficial to Kristen. After all, he was the owner of a casino. If he relied on those poor people to play, he wouldn't be able to make much money. At this time, he looked at Jianghu as if he was looking at a fat sheep. Of course, was Jianghu a fat sheep? The 10-minute break quickly passed. Winthrop and Chelsea came to the field again and the game continued. Chapter 626. Victory. With the last ball, Winthrop's kicker kicked the ball into the opponent's half of the field and ran behind him. After finishing the last minute, Winthrop's side also shouted loudly. Jianghu could not help but jump up and wave his fist vigorously. Compared to Winthrop's side, Chelsea's stands on the other side were far less lively. "Great play!" Jianghu shouted loudly to the crowd on the field with his hands by his mouth. Hearing Jianghu's words, Cersei and the others did not forget to wave at Jianghu while celebrating. The duration of a football game was actually very short. Of course, it was longer than a football game. Although it looked like it was only 80 minutes, the first half was 40 minutes, and the second half was 40 minutes. But with the addition of the 10 minutes for changing players and timeouts, it was indeed longer than a football game. Of course, this referred to the situation where there was no overtime and injury stoppage time. The game that seemed short but actually lasted for a long time was basketball. For example, in the NBA, it looked like the duration of a game was only 48 minutes, but it was divided into 4 sections. The two teams could call for a lot of stoppages. In addition to the official timeouts, it was not uncommon for a game to last for 2.5 hours. As for today's football game, although it wasn't an NFL game, it still lasted for about 2 hours. In the end, Winthrop won the game 37-30. The hero of the game was naturally Cersei. This guy scored 5 touchdowns and was the biggest contributor to today's victory. At the end of the game, Winthrop's people had already carried him up. And he also sat on everyone's shoulders, waving his arms vigorously. This victory was indeed very good. As for Chelsea's side, they were a little depressed. Indeed, the people on the Chelsea team were more aggressive. After all, they were all hired thugs. Oh no, they were hired as security guards. Their ferocity might be useful against those professional football players, but it was useless against some fishermen who relied on the sea for their livelihood all day long. Speaking of aggressiveness, these fishermen were much more valiant than them. After all, when they encountered other fishing boats overseas, conflict was inevitable. At least they were not afraid and dared to have physical contact. Their skills were better than the security guards, so it was inevitable that they would win the competition. In a while, we'll go to Old Tony's to buy some wine. What do you want to drink? It's my treat today. Jianghu clapped his hands and said loudly as he looked at the people walking towards him. Hearing Jianghu's words, these people burst into even louder cheers. After celebrating for about 10 minutes, Winthrop temporarily suppressed their mood because the Chelsea people had arrived. Of course, they were not here to pick a fight. As a member of this regional league, they were tough and dirty. But at the very least, their boss could still afford to lose. They still cared about their reputation. Therefore, they just came over to shake hands and say hello before leaving. Although some of the Winthrop players still had smiles on their faces, they did not ridicule the other party too much. After all, they were all from the neighboring town and would see each other often. There was no need to make things worse because of a competition. Moreover, they were not mortal enemies. You did a great job today. Congratulations. The Chelsea boss and captain shook hands with the Winthrop captain and said with a smile. Hearing what he said, the captain naturally smiled and replied with a few words. After a few simple greetings, the man walked to Jianghu's side. While he was sizing up Jianghu, Jianghu was also sizing up the guy. According to Delilah's introduction, the other team's captain was not simple. But it looked like there was no difference. This guy was about 1.78 meters tall, which was not considered tall in the United States. He looked to be in his 30s with a blonde buzz cut. His face had a sense of vicissitudes. He was not handsome, definitely not handsome. He could only be said to be very ordinary. But such an ordinary person had a great reputation around here. Of course, this reputation was not very good. How could a gambler have a good reputation? Hello, my name is Kristen Adis. I run a casino in Chelsea. If you are interested, you can come and play. After sizing up the other person's hand, Kristen Adis could not help but stretch out his hand and said to Jianghu. Jianghu, nice to meet you, but I don't have much talent for gambling. Looking at his outstretched hand, Jianghu shook it and then said with a smile. Hearing that Jianghu had no intention of getting to know him, Kristen Adis did not care. After shrugging, he said goodbye to his teammates and left with his men. Jiang, this guy is not a good person. It's best not to get too close to him in the future. Looking at the leaving Kristen Adis, Serge came over and whispered to Jianghu. Hearing his words, Jianghu also smiled. In fact, needless to say, he also knew that this guy was not a good person. Well, let's forget about him, let's go celebrate. For Jianghu, it is impossible for him to take the initiative to gamble, so this person is probably just a passerby with him. Turning his head, Jianghu looked at the crowd behind him and said loudly. Wow! As soon as they heard Jianghu say that he was going to celebrate, everyone naturally wouldn't be polite and shouted loudly. Then Jiang Hai and others drove together and left Boston. They first went to Old Tony's Cowboy Song Bar in Winthrop. There, they moved a lot of beer and some good quality wine to Serge's house. At this time, Serge's house was already prepared. There were barbecue racks and cured meat. After ordering 10 large portions of pizza, the party officially began. In the warehouse mixed with engine oil, the young people were having a good time, drinking beer and eating barbecue, but there was no noisy music. There was originally music, but because Serge knew that Jiang Hai didn't like it, she cancelled it. However, although there was no music, the atmosphere at the scene was still quite lively. Jiang Hai took a large bottle of beer and a large plate of barbecue meat, then went to a corner to eat. Although he wanted to integrate into this town, he was not familiar with it. To be honest, he was still not familiar with this place. He was not very good at making friends with strangers. What are you doing here alone? However, at this time, Delia couldn't help but smile as she walked over. She held a bottle of cocktail in her hand and sat beside Jiang Hai. This kind of cocktail was actually a pre-mixed cocktail. It was still very popular in the country, like the famous Wuxia. Jiang Hai had drunk it before, but this was the United States, while Wuxia was from Japan. Here, people preferred to drink Bacardi. Of course, this kind of cocktail was also sold in the country. The red and green color was very beautiful. The taste is also good and it is very popular with women, but Jiang Hai does not like to drink this kind of wine. He prefers to drink beer. I don't know anyone, so I'm here to fill my stomach first. Looking at Delia, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Are you full? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia smiled and looked at Jiang Hai, then asked. Almost, what's the matter? Jiang Hai sensed that the plate of meat was finished. It was impossible to say that he was full, but at the same time, he wasn't that hungry. Looking at Delia in front of him, Jiang Hai curiously asked. If you are full, I will take you to see something. Delia finished speaking, stood up with a smile, and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was also a little curious. What is there to see? So after hesitating for a moment, he put down the beer glass and plate in his hand and followed Delia. Delia led Jiang Hai through the crowd without attracting anyone's attention. She led Jiang Hai straight to the second floor of the factory. But as soon as they came up, Jiang Hai was stunned. Because at the corner of the second floor, a man and a woman were kissing passionately. The man's upper body was already red, and the woman's coat had been thrown far away. The man's hands were also reaching into the woman's clothes. They should be warming up, it seems. After the two saw Jiang Hai coming, they did not care about Jiang Hai and were still kissing passionately. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai felt a bit guilty. The reason he followed Delia was because it was daytime. He didn't think that Delia would do anything to him during the day. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai was curious about the second reason. But now, it seemed like he had underestimated Delia. Jiang Hai was a bit surprised. But now, it seemed like he had underestimated Delia. Okay, let's do it here. I want to show you this. Just as Jiang Hai was hesitating whether to run or not, Delia suddenly stopped in front of him and pulled Jiang Hai into the bathroom on the second floor. Under Jiang Hai's gaze, she instantly lifted her top, and then two abnormally plump breasts appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes drifted elsewhere. Delia, it's not good for you to do this. You have a boyfriend, and you know my situation. It's impossible between you and me. If something happens, I won't be able to explain it to old George. Feeling Delia's footsteps, Jiang Hai could not help but take a step back. Then, he looked to the side and said seriously. Hey, Jiang, I don't want to have any emotional disputes with you. I still love my new boyfriend very much, at least for now. I know you're not a good person, so I don't want to be your girlfriend. I'm just interested in you, so you don't need to feel burdened. If you want to fit in with us, you need to let go. Chapter 627. Cough, that's not right. Hearing Delia's words, Jianghu took another step back, his body even leaning against the door. It was the first time he had been so passive, and it was indeed somewhat baffling. I'm already 19 years old. I became an adult last year, so I don't need you to tell me what's right and what's wrong. Feel it? Don't you like it? Looking at Jianghu's old-fashioned appearance, Delia could not help but smile. She had heard before that Easterners were still very concerned about this thing and were not as open-minded as Westerners. Now it seemed that Jianghu was a very traditional young man. As she spoke, she had already taken a step forward and pulled Jianghu's hands with both hands, placing them on two places where they should not be placed. At the same time, her hands also placed on the things that Jianghu should not be placing on. Wow, this shape, it can't be. But as soon as her hands touched, Delia could not help but exclaim. Don't. Feeling Delia's movements, Jianghu immediately wanted to stop her, but unfortunately, Delia had already taken off Jianghu's pants. For the first time, Jianghu felt that wearing pants without a belt was not very good, but the instant chill made him understand that his existence had already been seen by Delia. Looking at the behemoth in front of her, Delia swallowed her saliva. Delia swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Then, without giving Jianghu a chance to resist, she knelt down and lowered her head. Hiss. Feeling that different feeling, Jianghu could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. And in his mind, the impulse brought about by the Dragon Balls was about to devour him. Jianghu was originally not a person who could not control himself, but ever since he had the Dragon Balls, his desire for more and more increased. His needs in this area were getting higher and higher, and he was getting less and less able to control himself. This might be the only side effect of the Dragon Balls. If Delia and Kelly had talked it over, then Jianghu might not have had any problems. Just like the day before yesterday, although they had made it clear and hinted so many times, Jianghu was still able to get away. But when the other party forced herself on him, Jianghu was stunned, and his rationality would be instantly swallowed by his desire. It was not until he turned into sage mode that his rationality returned. Of course, he was sober at this time, but his desire was really too strong. It was the same this time. In less than 3 minutes, Delia found that Jianghu's waist began to move, which made her delighted. But after more than 10 minutes, Delia discovered that Jianghu didn't seem to have any intention of turning into sage mode. I can't, my mouth is so sore. After forcibly pushing Jianghu away, Delia half knelt on the ground and said to Jianghu somewhat pitifully. However, Jianghu did not recover, but his consciousness was still there, and he knew that she was telling the truth. And now, it seemed to be a good time to start directly. Then Jianghu pulled her up, let her support her hands against the wall, and then removed the things she could not describe, and then did it in one go. Wow, two inside, don't you wear a raincoat? Feeling Jianghu's movements, Delia could not help but exclaim in a low voice, and then said with some worry. Are you afraid of being sick? Hearing her words, Jianghu froze for a moment. No one had ever said this to him before. That's not it. A rich person like you would definitely not let yourself be sick, but I'm afraid of having a baby. If I give birth to a yellow man in the future, how can I explain it? I have a boyfriend. Delia said softly as she glanced at Jianghu. Hearing her words, Jianghu ignored her and began to move. Just get it outside in a while. Jianghu whispered to Delia as he continued to move. Looking at Jianghu, Delia whispered into Jianghu's ear, get it into my mouth, I like it. Next was the part that could not be described, although there were many parts above that could not be described. But when Jianghu did things, he always needed some impulse and passion, and these were the ones. Sometimes, people would feel that time passed very slowly, and sometimes it would feel that time passed very quickly. Just like when doing this kind of thing, time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. When Jianghu resisted and came out, Delia's mouth. When he thought of the key words, he also let out a long sigh and then sat weakly on the toilet next to him. As for Delia, she had already lost all her strength. After swallowing a mouthful, she wiped her face and the corner of her mouth with her hand, and then gently licked them clean. Then, she sat on the ground, constantly panting. "Are you okay?" Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai asked softly. Now that he had returned to his saintly state, he felt that he had done something wrong. After all, Delia's father knew him, and she was someone else's girlfriend. As for what other people would do if they encountered such a thing, Jiang Hai did not know, but he felt somewhat guilty. "It's okay, it's really great. It's the best experience I've ever had. Jiang Hai, you're really a perfect lover." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia raised her thumb and said with a look of approval. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also felt a little awkward. At this time, no matter how he replied, it seemed that it would be wrong. "Hey, Delia, how do you want me to say this? After all, you have a boyfriend, and I know your father. I said before, I can't give you anything. Of course, if you want to buy something, you can look for me." Hearing Delia's words, Jiang Hai helplessly sighed. "What is this called? I'm also making money now." "Huh, Jiang, I have to admit that you're really cute. I don't want anything when I do this with you. This is the United States, and this is very normal. I want to integrate into our lives, so you need to try to understand us." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Delia could not help but smile. Then she slowly stood up and came to Jiang Hai's side, sitting directly on Jiang Hai's lap. At the same time, her pair of plump breasts pressed against Jiang Hai's chin. In America, it's normal for friends to occasionally do unspeakable things. Everyone needs to vent. Men need to do it, and so do women. So, if you're not looking for someone with a clear goal, there's nothing wrong with it. That's why we still know how to restrain ourselves. When our father was young, in the 1980s, Americans were the most open-minded. I heard that hormones were everywhere at that time, and the relationships between men and women were so messy that it made one's hair stand on end. Even within the same family, it was quite common for cousins to have sex. Of course, you couldn't have babies. Of course, it's not possible to have children. Looking at Jiang Hai, Delia smiled and said. Indeed, men and women in the United States did not pay much attention to these things. Many men and women had already done it when they were in junior high school. Of course, there was no junior high school in the United States. Junior high school and high school were connected. There were also schools that were connected to junior high school, and elementary school. But at that time, exploration of the opposite sex was not rare in the United States. On the contrary, there were not many people in the United States who had psychological burdens like Jiang Hai. Of course, those with ulterior motives were different. Hearing Delia's words, Jiang Hai could not help but be speechless. What kind of fallacy is this? Messing around with men and women became an important node for me to integrate into this small town? It's too much of a joke. Okay, don't feel burdened. Let me hug you for a while. I'm really tired, and I don't want to leave you. Feeling that Jiang Hai's mood might be a little better, Delia also hugged Jiang Hai's head and said with a smile. Kaka. At this moment, there was suddenly the sound of a key turning outside the bathroom door. It startled Jiang Hai, but at this time, there was nothing in the bathroom at all. What should he do? Before he could figure it out, the door had been opened. Then Kelly Soren's little face, which was a little red from wine, appeared outside the door. After seeing Jiang Hai and Delia inside, she could not help but glare at them bitterly. Then, in a flash, she entered the bathroom, locked the door behind her, and walked quickly to the two. Hey, Delia, you already have a boyfriend. Why are you still clinging to Jiang Hai? Grabbing Delia's arm, Kelly Soren directly pulled her up from Jiang Hai's body, then looked at her and said with a displeased expression. Hey, dear Kelly, we're just hugging each other for warmth. I'll help you try it. I have to tell you, Jiang Hai really has this. That's great. Looking at the angry Kelly, Delia chuckled and then gave Kelly a thumbs up. Of course, she was talking about Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Kelly could not help but raise her eyebrows. She glanced at Jiang Hai's naked lower body and looked at Jiang Hai with some complaints. Then, she sat on Jiang Hai's lap and took off her shirt in an instant. Since you said you're helping me try it, then I'll try it myself. Looking at the dazed Jiang Hai in front of her, Kelly said fiercely. Then, she pulled Jiang Hai's face with both hands and kissed him directly. Feeling Kelly's breath and the taste of alcohol in his mouth, Jiang Hai reacted. He was just about to push her away, but his hand was grabbed by Delia. Of course, my friend, I'm here to help you. Looking at Delia's smile, Jiang Hai felt that it would be difficult for him to escape unscathed. When Delia pressed Jiang Hai's hand on the two places on Kelly's body that could not be described, Jiang Hai felt that he seemed to be unable to control himself again. Perhaps, as they said, he wanted to integrate into the other party's world. First, he wanted the other party to have similar habits, and their habits toward Jiang Hai were obviously not so pure. But as a man, in the face of such habits, Jiang Hai could not say anything because he did not know who was taking advantage of him. Chapter 628. You're back, why are you so late? Seeing Jiang Hai walk in, Bernice, who was leaning on the sofa and eating blue plums, asked with some confusion. As she spoke, she stuffed a few more blue plums into her mouth. Her fingertips and mouth were bluish-purple, as if she was poisoned, but Jiang Hai didn't have the time to make fun of her today. Oh, I drank a little too much at noon, so I rested at his place. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai smiled, walked to the sofa, then sat down directly, looked up at the light, and then slowly looked back at his big fish tank. What's wrong? Haven't you recovered yet? Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice couldn't help but ask Jiang Hai with some confusion. No, I've recovered, but there are some. Well, I don't quite understand. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai immediately raised his head and said with a chuckle. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai was still a little flustered. He went to watch the game today, then went to Celsie's place, and what he did, there was no need to say. With Kelly joining the battle later, Jiang Hai and the others stayed in the bathroom upstairs for an entire afternoon. Fortunately, Celsie's house has a total of 4 bathrooms, 1 upstairs, 1 downstairs, 1 in the warehouse, and 1 in the reception room. Otherwise, they would be suffocated. By the time Jiang Hai helped Kelly and Delia out, it was already past 6:00 in the evening. Most people had already left, and the owner, Celsie, also drank too much and collapsed on the sofa. Jiang Hai didn't say much and helped the two leave. Of course, he only came back after sending them back to their respective homes. But even though he came back, Jiang Hai was still a little confused about what Kelly and Delia said this afternoon. What do you not understand? Tell me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice turned around and looked at Jiang Hai with some confusion. Looking at her, Jiang Hai also turned his head and looked at Bernice. He thought about it in his mind. Maybe if he talked to Bernice, she might give him an answer. It's like this, I've been trying to integrate with the people in the town recently, but I found out today that I'm really different from the people in the town. I can tolerate other things, but the problem is that I can't accept fighting. It's like the Americans are very relaxed about fighting. They don't have much sense of moral betrayal, which makes me a little puzzled. Looking at Bernice, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. He didn't tell the complete truth, but she should be able to understand if he said it this way. This. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice's face suddenly turned red. She was still a young girl. She was still a little uncomfortable when Jiang Hai asked her such things, but she was asking for it. If she didn't answer, it didn't seem too good. So after a little hesitation, she explained to Jiang Hai. Let's talk about education in America. Let's talk about the education in China and the United States. In the United States, there are 2 types of education. One is similar to the education you see today, a pure American education. They will teach the children about combat when they are very young to prevent any problems. But it is also because of this that the children in the United States are very curious about this aspect. When their physical conditions allow it, they may try it. Bernice thought for a moment and said hesitantly. As she said, education in this area was indeed very early in the United States, but it also developed into two extremes. One kind was the Catholic family. They were very strict about fighting because in their view, if one's body was impure or had an abortion, they would die without a burial place. Therefore, generally speaking, the Catholic family was very strict about this aspect. But most ordinary American families were very casual about the management in this area. They didn't care about their children knowing the other half when they were 13 or 14 years old. Of course, they had to be prepared for it. Although Catholicism was the world's largest religion, there were definitely not many people who didn't believe in it. This created the mainstream impression in the United States. Wuxia had always been very conservative in this area. They began to set up education in this area after high school, so the current environment in the country was very chaotic. But in fact, after graduating from high school, most of the boys and girls in the country had not fought before. At least 70% of them had not fought before. But in the United States, more than 80% of them had fought before. This was also one of the reasons why the media in the two countries criticized each other. The domestic media would say that the combat education in the West was earlier and more advanced. It could let the children know more, and this was beneficial for the children's development. On the other hand, the Western media would criticize their own government for introducing combat education too early. This would make the children develop a bad interest and curiosity in these things, and thus, they would try it out. This was not beneficial to the children's development. Of course, both sides had their reasons. This was only the media's criticism. After all, foreign things could not be forced on a country. For example, if the same thing was used on Wuxia in the United States, Wuxia would probably be in chaos. Because people had too much power, they would become arrogant. Wuxia had never lacked ambitious people since ancient times, and it was hard to say whether they would use proper means to obtain the power they wanted. So, Wuxia would be in chaos. And if the same thing was used on the United States in the Wuxia, the United States would also be in chaos. The Americans were used to freedom. If you suddenly asked them to pay for their own medical care, pension insurance, and social welfare, and if they lost their jobs, they would have to find a job themselves. Every day, they would have to work hard for a few square meters of house. They would definitely rebel. Therefore, different national conditions meant different natural environments. However, Jianghu was now a Wuxia citizen in the United States. Since he had to find a way to integrate into this country, it would be very troublesome. Otherwise, he would have to abandon the habits he had developed in the country all these years and integrate into the country like an American. But he was not willing to do so. He had some things on him that he would not throw away no matter what. But this collision of Eastern and Western cultures really made him feel a little overwhelmed. In the United States, this Western world, before a man and a woman were married, the restrictions on each other were not very strict. Things like delias were very common. After all, they did not get along with each other for the purpose of marriage. But in China, since a man and a woman had confirmed their relationship, if one of them cheated, it would be a big mistake. Who would play it down like this? Unless it was those white-collar workers who pursued a one-night stand or something like that. Otherwise, why would someone act like this? Jianghu was not a white-collar worker. He would not pursue a one-night stand or anything like that. He did not lack women. This kind of cultural shock really made him feel a little overwhelmed. That was why he asked Bernice. But after a long time, Bernice still could not explain it clearly. Because she did not really understand these things. Hey, after a long time, you still don't understand. In short, if you feel that there is a way to integrate into this group and you are willing to do it, then you can give it a try. For example, go to a party or watch their football game. These are also things that I want you to do. But if you have some doubts about some things, then you don't have to follow the American attitude. For example, this thing, understand? Seeing that Jiang Hai had listened to her for a long time and still had some confusion in his eyes, Bernice pursed her lips. In fact, she had already started scolding him in her heart. This Jiang Hai was really annoying. Did he not know that she was a big girl? How shy would she be if he asked her that? Although she was used to learning Chinese and Western culture, she was still a traditional Wuxia girl in her bones. After saying so much, she felt that she had already broken through her limits. But if she did not explain it clearly, she was afraid that Jiang Hai would mess around. So after saying that last sentence, Bernice stood up. She did not care about the pot of blue plum beside her and directly ran back to her room. She needed to digest it properly. If I'm willing to try, I can try. If I'm not willing to try, can I not try? This seems to work. Jiang Hai took out a few blue plums from the big bowl and threw them into his mouth. As he ate, he muttered softly. He felt that he wasn't himself this afternoon. This wasn't good news. Unknowingly, this was what Jiang Hai was thinking. He sat on the sofa and ate the blue plums while unconsciously watching the TV in front of him. Aphrodite and the others did not come over tonight. There was no one else in Jiang Hai's room, so he had a lot of time to think about some things. After an unknown amount of time, when the last blue plum was thrown into Jiang Hai's mouth, he could not help but shudder. After that, Jiang Hai felt a little strange. With his physical fitness, why would he shudder? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai could not help but look into the distance. In the end, he happened to see the living room's window flapping in the wind. Looking through the window, Jiang Hai's eyes could not help but brighten. He only saw that the large expanse of snowflakes had fallen from the sky at some point. The entire world had unknowingly changed into a white coat. Putting the bowl aside, Jiang Hai stood up and walked to the window. He glanced at the snow on the windowsill. It was almost 2 or 3 centimeters thick. Looking out again, it was pitch black. Not to mention stars, there was not even a moon tonight. Oh, it's snowing. And it looks like it won't be small. Looking at the pitch black sky outside, Jiang Hai's face showed a smile for the first time since he returned home. He was still very familiar with such a scene. Because his hometown would also have such heavy snow at this time, but now his home was in Winthrop. Chapter 629. Boston was not very good at this point. It got cold too quickly. In fact, Boston's latitude was about 41 degrees, which was the same as the latitude of the imperial capital in China. But when it started to get cold here, it was almost the same as Jiang Hai's hometown, Bingcheng. In many countries, the first snow actually had a lot of meaning, but for Jiang Hai, snow was just snow. It had no meaning. After seeing the snow last night, Jiang Hai closed all the windows and turned on the geothermal. But even so, he didn't sleep very well this night. After all, the windows had been open for a long time. When they were suddenly closed, he really felt a little suffocated. It was rare for Jiang Hai to wake up at 6:00 again. But at 6:00 in Boston, the sky had just begun to brighten. He opened the bedroom window to let some air in. As soon as the window was opened, the cold wind rushed in instantly. It was so cold that Jiang Hai couldn't help but shiver. The weapon under his crotch couldn't help but twitch. Hiss, it's really strong, but it seems that winter is here. Looking at the white expanse outside the snow, Jiang Hai couldn't help but whisper. Although he was a northerner, he obviously liked summer more than winter. Shrinking his neck, Jiang Hai went to the bathroom to wash up, then changed his clothes and went downstairs. He found that little Huang and Xiaobai were a little lazy today, but Jiang Hai didn't care about them and opened the door directly. When the door opened, the cold wind poured into Jiang Hai's villa in an instant. At this time, little Huang, Xiaobai, and Qiuqiu, who were sleeping on the warm floor, reacted almost instantly. They looked at Jiang Hai with resentment. This guy is too annoying. After getting used to it, Jiang Hai simply stretched, exhaled a breath of white air, and prepared to go to the warehouse at the cowshed. Recently, he had to go to the warehouse every morning to help bale grass. Although he was the boss, he couldn't just do nothing, right? But before he left, he saw Robbins Garcia and the others coming out of the warehouse with some things. "Hi, Robbins Garcia, aren't you bale grass today?" Seeing them come over, Jianghu couldn't help but ask with some doubts. Boss, where are we going to get grass?" Hearing Jianghu's words, Robbins Garcia glanced around, then said helplessly. Hearing what he said, Jianghu was also dumbfounded for a moment, then laughed self-deprecatingly. "Yes, it's snowing everywhere, where are we going to find grass?" Thinking of this, he felt a little awkward in the air. "By the way, boss, let's help you clear the ground here first." Maybe he felt Jianghu's awkwardness. As a qualified lackey, Robbins Garcia immediately changed the topic and said with a serious face. "The snow is not very thick, there's no need to clear it." He raised his feet and looked. Although the snow last night was not light, it was not particularly heavy. After all, it was just the first snow. Although Jianghu did not eat fried chicken or drink beer, the snow was indeed not heavy. Now it looks like it's only 3 or 4 centimeters thick, which is far worse than last winter. It's because the snow is thin that we need to deal with it immediately because the weather is not that cold. Today's weather forecast said that it will be 13 degrees. The snow will turn into water at noon, and then it will freeze again at night before it dries. Robbins Garcia said to Jianghu when he heard Jianghu's words. Hearing what he said, Jianghu also nodded. Indeed, after the snow turns into water, it will be troublesome when it freezes again. Jianghu also doesn't want his house to be so slippery, so he immediately agreed and picked up a broom to help. When it first snowed last year, it was already the end of November, and the first snow at that time was quite heavy. A broom was not very useful in that kind of snow, but now there is only a few centimeters of thin snow, so a broom is the best thing. On the contrary, shovels and the like are not very effective. The grassland does not care whether there is snow or not, so Jianghu only needs to clear the road and the parking lot in front of the house. Today, Edward Anderson and the others are not in a hurry to go to the dock. They all came to help. It is said that there is strength in numbers, and this is really true. Jianghu and the others started sweeping at 6:00, and they were all done by about 8:00. Jianghu also deliberately drove the helicopter around the manor with Marlon Rupert. After making sure that there is no road left unswept, he returned home. When he returned home, Bernice, Xiaoya, Daliana, Marian, and Azalina were already up. Xiaoya had also prepared breakfast. Everyone gathered around the table and started eating. When did it snow last night? It actually snowed so heavily. While eating Xiaoya's wontons, Bernice asked with some doubts. She didn't notice that it was snowing outside when she went to bed last night. "You just left not long ago, I don't remember." Hearing Bernice's words, Jianghu recalled for a moment. He also forgot when Bernice left. He only remembered that after seeing the snow, he went upstairs to sleep. "It's snowing today, do you have any activities?" Looking at Jianghu, Bernice asked with a smile. "I don't think so, just stay at home." Hearing Bernice's words, Jianghu curled his lips. He had to admit that during the summer, Jianghu wasn't too idle. He still had some things to do. But when it came to winter, he really didn't have anything to do. Last winter, he played basketball and fished for the whole winter. But last year, he was alone, so it didn't matter. This year, there were so many people around him, so he couldn't play basketball and fish. Moreover, after that addiction passed, he didn't like these two hobbies so much. If you ask him now what he is going to do in winter, he is a little confused because he doesn't know what he is going to do. "If you have nothing to do today, let's go make tanghulu." Seeing that Jianghu had nothing to do, Bernice thought for a moment and suddenly said to Jianghu. Hearing her proposal, Jianghu was stunned for a moment, then touched his chin. This is also okay. After thinking about it, Jianghu felt that making tanghulu was not bad. Tanghulu is a traditional snack of Wuxia. It is available all over the country. He believes that people in Wuxia are not unfamiliar with this snack. The method is also very simple. Use a bamboo stick to skewer the fruit you want to eat. The most common one is mountain dregs. Of course, there are many different kinds now, such as grapes, kiwi, peaches, apples, oranges, grass, and so on. There are all kinds of fruits. Then use the boiled sugar to cook it, and then cool it down. It is very delicious. However, in terms of cooling, one thing was very important, and that was to freeze it. The taste of frozen candied haws was very different from that of unfrozen ones. But if you put these candied haws in the cold storage or the refrigerator, the effect wouldn't be very good. The best effect was to use the weather to freeze it. Then, the taste would be quite good. In fact, Bernice said that she wanted to eat this thing in the autumn. This was because Jianghu had a lot of fruit trees. Autumn was the time to harvest them. Looking at those fruits, she was a little greedy. But at that time, the weather wasn't cold enough, so Jianghu didn't do it. Now that the weather was cold, it was possible to do it. Great, then let's eat together. Hearing that Jianghu agreed to make it, Bernice couldn't help but smile. Then she said to the girls next to her. Hearing Bernice's words, Xiaoya was very excited because she has eaten it before. But Delina and Marian looked at each other. They really haven't eaten this thing before. But seeing Bernice and Xiaoya's excited appearance, they were also very interested. Only Azalina shrugged her shoulders. She had eaten this thing before, but she didn't think that it was delicious. But since everyone wanted to make it, she was no exception. Since everyone agreed to do this, everyone's eating speed increased a lot. After eating, Jianghu and Bernice went to the warehouse where the fruits were stored to see what they were going to do with it. Jianghu liked to eat fruits, and because of the spiritual qi here, the fruits were growing quite well. Although he didn't intend to sell fruits, he planted a lot of them at home. Hawthorns, blue plums, kiwis, nectarines, cherries, and so on. He had everything. Looking at these fruits, Bernice's appetite was aroused. After looking around, Jianghu picked up a lot of things to eat. Then he carried them back to the villa. After bringing the fruits back, they began to prepare. Removing the seeds and peeling, these things didn't need Jianghu's help as Bernice already knew. But there was a problem, they didn't have any bamboo sticks or rock candy. This gave the girls a headache. I'll go to the town. But Jianghu didn't care. Then he decided to go to the town and see if he could buy it. He knew that he could buy bamboo sticks. This was because in the United States, some people like to eat barbecued meat with bamboo sticks. It was said that people from the Middle East and Wuxia spread the news. During the last barbecue party, Jianghu ate a lot of barbecued meat with bamboo sticks. So he could definitely buy bamboo sticks. But for rock candy, he would have to try his luck. Americans like to eat sugar, granulated sugar, soft sugar, caramel sugar, maple sugar. They like to eat all kinds of sugar. But Jianghu wasn't sure if there was any rock sugar in the United States. So after talking to everyone, Jianghu drove to the town. When his car drove out of the manor, he saw a cleaning truck on the road of the town. After giving way to the snow removal truck, Jianghu drove into the town. But as soon as he entered, he found that the town was very busy. At this time, everyone was cleaning up the snow from yesterday. It seems that except for the time when the town was being renovated, there wasn't such a busy time. When they saw Jianghu again, they didn't know if it was because Jianghu had participated in the two parties and went to watch the town's football team play. This time, when Jianghu came to the town, at least the young people were more friendly to Jianghu. Some people began to take the initiative to greet Jianghu. This was a good start. After parking the car in the parking lot, Jianghu tightened his clothes and went to a supermarket on the business street. Supermarket was the abbreviation for supermarket, but in fact, this was not a supermarket. It was more like a convenience store. But even so, the daily sales here weren't low. Even if it was winter in Winthrop, there were still some people who came here to play. At least in this shop, there were more than a dozen people buying things. Many of them were Wuxia people. In addition to buying some daily necessities, many Wuxia people would also take some cigarettes here when they left. This was a habit of the Chinese people. Although Jianghu did not smoke, he had some understanding of the cigarettes in the United States. When it came to cigarettes in the United States, 9 out of 10 people would think of Marlboro. But in fact, Marlboro was a Swiss brand and had nothing to do with the United States. But the sales in the United States were the highest. In the United States, the most popular cigarette brand was Camel, followed by Winston, Good Fortune, and another brand called American Spirit. There was a picture of a smoking Native American on the outside of the cigarette box. It was said that this type of cigarette did not contain any essence and was made from pure tobacco leaves. It was very popular in the United States, but it was also very strong. Other than American Spirit, the best-selling cigarette was White Marlboro. At this time, the Wuxia tourists in the shop were all picking cigarettes. Each person could only bring 2 cigarettes back to China, so there were not many choices. This shop was Jianghu's shop. He rented it, so when Jianghu walked in, he was stopped by the shop manager. "Hi, Jiang, you are here. What do you want to buy?" Seeing Jianghu walk in, the shop manager, a bearded man, said with a smile. His current life was closely related to Jianghu. Moreover, he also heard that Jianghu wanted to integrate into this place. Therefore, he would not be stingy to show his goodwill. "Oh, hello, you are Luo Lin." Seeing the bearded shop manager come over to greet him, Jianghu hesitated for a moment. After thinking for a long time, he did not call out this person's name. Indeed, he was not familiar with the people in Winthrop. Luo Lin Canal. "It's good that you remember my name. Is there anything you want to buy?" Hearing that Jianghu still remembered that his name was Luo Lin, the big bearded man was very happy. He asked Jianghu with a happy face. Chapter 630. Let me ask, do you have any bamboo sticks and rock candy? Hearing Luo Lin's words, Jianghu also chuckled. He had to admit that sometimes these Americans were quite friendly. He glanced at the supermarket and said to Luo Lin, "Bamboo sticks. Wooden sticks, right? They're inside. As for rock candy, what kind? Food? Drink?" Hearing Jianghu's words, Luo Lin froze for a moment, then whispered to Jianghu. Looking at his mysterious appearance, Jianghu was also somewhat at a loss. There is a word in English for rock candy, but this word is not as beautiful as imagined. In China, rock candy was rock candy. Everyone would know what it was. But in the United States, rock candy was written in English as candy. It meant candy, or fancy clothing, or sweet words. There was also another explanation, which was gu ku, 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 and so on. So when he heard Jianghu say that he wanted this thing, Luo Lin also gestured with his hands. "Oh, no, I don't touch these things. I want to eat rock candy. Whole, translucent candy. Put it in your mouth and eat it." Hearing his words, Jianghu immediately shook his head. "He will not touch these messy things." You scared me. The candy is in the 3rd row. You can go look for it. I don't know if it's there or not." Seeing that Jianghu did not look for those things, Luo Lin also breathed a sigh of relief. Although in the United States, there are places where smoking marijuana is not illegal, but these drugs are illegal everywhere. Plus, these are not good things. He does not want Jianghu to be involved in these things. Smiling at him, Jianghu walked to the corner of the 3rd row. As a result, he found that there were a lot of sweets and all kinds of sweets. Americans really like to eat sweets, they really like to eat sweets. Every year, the average adult in the country absorbs 22 spoons of sweets every day, which is more than 100 grams, which is about 2 ounces. That's an average of every day, not every month, not every year. Maybe Americans don't know what healthcare is, or maybe they really like to eat candy and have immunity. Otherwise, how can they not be afraid of diabetes? As for teenagers, well, they eat candy even more fiercely, 34 spoons a day. Almost all of their snacks are sweet, not to mention the national food pie, donuts, chocolate, and so on. These high-calorie, high-sugar foods are their favorite. This can be seen from the variety of candies here. Jianghu walked to the counter and squatted down to take a look. He found rock candy here, which saves a lot of trouble. He took 2 bags of rock candy and went to the side to get bamboo skewers. Oh, no, wooden skewers. There is almost no bamboo in the United States, and they do not use bamboo. Among the 3 major types of bamboo in the world, Asian bamboo is the most widely used. American bamboo only grows in Latin America. Even if there is bamboo in the United States, it is very rare, and no one will cut it. But it does not matter if he uses wooden skewers. After getting the candy and wooden skewers, Jianghu was about to pay the bill. But when he passed by the counter, he saw a shelf selling drinks. So, Jianghu took a bottle of Coca-Cola 0 degrees. A long time ago, he liked drinking 0 degrees. When this drink was launched, it attracted a lot of attention. But later, it was unknown if it was because of the suppression of the industry, or if there was really a problem, but the aspartame used in 0 degrees was exposed as a cancer-causing substance. For a period of time, it was taken off the shelves all over the world. But later, for some reason, it reappeared. Jianghu did not know whether it was cancer-causing or not, but Jianghu knew that it did not have many calories, so it was fine to drink. Jianghu took the 3 items to the counter and was about to pay the bill. But at that moment, a man in Indian clothing walked in and stood behind Jianghu. Jianghu was familiar with this man. He was an Iroquois. When Jianghu and Mayor Wallace were discussing setting up a Native American store in the town, Mayor Wallace went to the mountains and met with the Iroquois. Then, he came forward to facilitate this matter. This Iroquois was the most business-minded among the Iroquois tribe in the mountains. When he heard about this, he persuaded the chief of his tribe to come out of the mountains and become the manager of this small store. Indeed, if an Indian store was not being sold by a Native American, it would more or less give people the impression that it was selling dog meat under false pretenses. It was because of this Iroquois that the store's business was quite good. According to Moses Adams' calculations, the Indian store's total revenue in the 3 months of August, September, and October alone was $700,000. After deducting the $200,000 spent on purchasing goods, the store made a net profit of $500,000. Jianghu got 40%, which was $200,000. The town got 20%, which was $100,000, and the Iroquois got 40%, which was $200,000. Of course, the most important thing was that these goods were all bought from the Iroquois. In other words, they had earned a total of $400,000. This Iroquois, who was always in the limelight, naturally made a lot of money. Originally, he had rented a house to live in, but recently, Jianghu heard that he was going to buy a house in town. "Hey, Jiang, you're here to buy something too?" While Jianghu was sizing him up, the Iroquois, who had been looking up as if he was thinking about what to buy, also noticed Jianghu. He called out excitedly, but his accent was a little strange. "Yes, you're here to buy something too." Although his accent was a little strange, Jianghu still understood what he was saying. "I ran out of cigarettes, so I came to buy some." Hearing Jianghu's words, the man could not help but smile and say. When this man came, Jianghu remembered that he was reluctant to buy cigarettes. Instead, he just rolled up the tobacco leaves he brought from the mountains to smoke. Although it was strong and natural, it was not very comfortable to smoke. His mouth was full of smoke. Now that he had money, he naturally wanted to buy something better. When Jianghu heard him, he smiled and chatted with him. After chatting for a while, it was Jianghai's turn. After paying for these things, Jianghai left the supermarket. He opened the can of Coke and took a sip. After a while, he took a big gulp. It was indeed much more comfortable. As he walked, Jianghai drank. As for the people on the road, they kept saying hello to Jianghai. For their kindness, Jianghai responded to them with a smile. Unknowingly, he also walked to the parking lot. After getting in the car, Jianghai drove back to the manor. When he came, there was still some snow on the road. Although the snowplow swept more snow to the roadside, there was still some snow in the middle of the road. At this time, when the sun came out, the snow became water. It was fine to walk now, but if it froze at night, it would be troublesome. Looking at the situation on the road, Jianghai felt that if there was nothing important, he should not go to the town these days. After driving all the way back to his manor, Jianghai got out of the car and took the things into the house. At this time, Daliana and the others had already finished preparing the fruits. Logically speaking, when skewering candied haws, such as hawthorn, the hawthorn should be cut from the middle, then the seeds inside should be removed, and then the hawthorn should be closed. Then, the hawthorn should be skewered with bamboo sticks. There was a problem with skewers, and that was, the butt of the hawthorn would not be delicious. Therefore, what Bernice and the others did was to use chopsticks to stab the hawthorn through its butt. This way, the seeds would be directly removed, and the butt would also fall. Although there would be less meat, it was not a big deal. As for the other things, it was much simpler. The grapes were peeled and seeded, the kiwis were peeled and cut into small pieces, the blue plum was peeled and seeded, and the grass was directly cut in half. When Jianghai came back, these things were almost done. Seeing that Jianghai came back with the wooden stick, the others also began to skewer the fruits. Unknowingly, they had already skewered dozens of skewers. There were not many hawthorn skewers left, so Jianghai began to boil the sugar. This was the most difficult part of making candied haws. The ratio of sugar to water was 2:1, and the mixture was poured into the pot and boiled for about 20 minutes. There must be granulated sugar and rock sugar in this sugar, and it must be boiled for 20 minutes. During the boiling, it must be stirred constantly, otherwise, it would be burnt. After 20 minutes, the sugar was boiling very fiercely, and small dense bubbles had appeared, and the color had become golden yellow. At this time, it was necessary to use chopsticks to pick it to see if it could be pulled out. When making candied sweet potatoes, this kind of sugar was also used. At this time, it was necessary to turn off the heat and speed up, because it would become caramel in a while, and then there would be no way to eat it. After putting the sugar together, they quickly took the candied haws and rolled them in the sugar. After all of them were mixed, they directly put them on the marble slab to cool. Because the marble slab itself was low in temperature, it could help the candied haws take shape, and it was very slippery. When it was fixed, these candied haws could be removed. After waiting for a long time, Bernice and the others finally saw the candied haws take shape. Bernice wanted to take a piece, but she was slapped on the back of her hand by Jianghai. Feeling Jianghai's action, Bernice couldn't help but bare her fangs and brandish her claws at Jianghai. Now is not the time to eat, it has to be frozen for a night. Looking at her appearance, Jianghai couldn't help but laugh and pat her head. Sometimes, Bernice was like a child, which really made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Tch. Hearing Jianghai's words, Bernice couldn't help but slap her mouth, and then stared at the candied haws without moving her eyes. Well, let's play something, otherwise, it's too boring to stay at home. Looking at the people in front of him, Jianghai clapped his hands and said to everyone. Hearing Jianghai's words, these girls' thoughts about the candied haws were really diverted. For a while, everyone in the room looked at each other, thinking, what should they play? Play poker, it's very simple. Glancing at Jianghai and others, Azalina spoke first. But there's no point in playing poker if you don't bet something. Hearing Azalina's words, Jianghai thought for a while and said. It's really boring to play poker without gambling. After all, the way poker is played is too simple. Then let's play aeroplane chess. Looking at each other, Delina couldn't help but say excitedly. But that thing can only be played by 4 people. But hearing her words, Bernice on the other side spoke up. Hearing Bernice's words, Jianghu and others fell into silence again, because they didn't know what to play. Otherwise, let's play 3 kingdoms. Just when everyone was a little helpless and didn't know what to play, Little Ye said next to them. Hearing Little Ye's words, Jianghu and others all looked at her. 3 kingdoms? Hearing Little Ye's words, Jianghu's mind couldn't help but flash a scene of him and his buddies playing the 3 kingdoms. But thinking about it, it has been a long time since he last played it. Well, 3 kingdoms, in the past, I could only stay in my room. It was boring to study recipes all the time. I couldn't watch TV or play with my mobile phone because there would be radiation, so I liked to play some board games and the like. Hearing Jianghu's words, Little Ye said with a smile. Hearing what Little Ye said, Jianghu and others looked at each other. 3 kingdoms, what is it? As if seeing the eagerness in Jianghu and Little Ye's eyes, Delina and Marian couldn't help but ask strangely. They are pure Americans. They don't know what 3 kingdoms is, they don't even know about 3 kingdoms. Well, it's a very simple game, you will know after playing it. Hearing Delina and Marian's words, Jianghu also smiled, then signaled to Little Ye with his eyes. Little Ye immediately ran upstairs. Since Jianghu cured her disease, although Little Ye still looks very quiet, she is a lot more cheerful. In the past, because she couldn't get any sunlight, she was lacking calcium all year round. In addition, she had osteoporosis and a serious lack of all vitamins. It can be said that even if she wanted to run, she couldn't. Fortunately, because of Bernice's guidance all year round. So in her heart, she didn't have any inferiority complex or mental illness like autism. But now that Jianghu cured her, she is very cheerful. Now, if she can run, she will never walk. When eating and chatting with Jianghu and others, if she can sit under the sun, she will never sit in a shady place. Looking at her change, whether it is Jianghu or Bernice, in fact, they are happy in their hearts. Especially in Jianghu's view, the best thing he did was to cure her. Looking at Little Ye's slender and tall figure, her pure white and flawless body, cough. It seems to be a bit off track. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.